Chapter 81. The Trial of Focus. In the hearts of all the cultivators, a single thought emerged simultaneously. This is a windfall. Just by looking at this first level, the number of cultivation techniques exceeded tens of thousands. Taking some of them out at random would be equivalent to years of hard work. A wave of desire surged in the hearts of the cultivators. Although these cultivators were already very envious of the techniques on the bookshelves, they were still restrained by Qin Tang's previous display of power and didn't dare to act recklessly. However, it seemed that Qin Tang was unaware of the abnormality among the cultivators. He looked at the rows of bookshelves, a look of nostalgia in his eyes, and slowly said, "The path of the heart lies in focus, courage, and perseverance. This first trial is to test your level of focus. There are 36,541 techniques here. For the next period, stay here and transcribe these techniques. You have 3 months. After 3 months, I will assess you based on the quantity and quality of the techniques you transcribed." Upon hearing Qin Tang's words, all the cultivators present showed wild excitement. So many techniques were actually made available for them to transcribe. As long as they could remember a few techniques, even if they gained nothing else later, this adventure would still be worth it. Ignoring the reactions of the cultivators present, Qin Tang casually pointed, and hundreds of sets of tables and chairs floated up in the attic. On the tables were brushes, ink, paper, and inkstones. "All right, you may begin. I hope you don't disappoint me," Qin Tang said and took out a wine gourd from somewhere, drinking from it again. Then he leaned against the wall, motionless, seemingly falling asleep. Seeing Qin Tang giving the order, these cultivators couldn't hold back. They rushed to the bookshelves, picked up the techniques, and checked them out. After a while, the attic erupted into a commotion. "What is this? How is this possible? Golden Flame Intense Fire Technique, a fire attribute technique. You can cultivate it all the way to the nascent soul stage. This book, and this one too, they're all nascent soul level techniques. Haha, it's a windfall, a complete windfall this time." Watching the cultivators, seemingly insane, Li Fan couldn't help but sneer inwardly. He randomly picked up a technique, chose a table, and began transcribing. He didn't bother to delve into the contents of the technique, he just patiently copied it word by word. Because he knew, these techniques were all illusory. In the previous life, the cultivators who had explored this trial had already reached a conclusion about the techniques that appeared in this trial. No matter how you recorded the techniques during the trial, once you left the Cloudwater Heavenly Palace, all the records would disappear. As if they never existed. These tempting techniques were like a mirror's reflection or a moon in water, tools to lure one's mind. Although some of the cultivators present had a vague idea of the truth. But, when faced with genuine nascent soul-level techniques, how many could resist the temptation and not read them carefully? There were even 1 or 2 individuals who were directly captivated by the profound and miraculous aspects of the techniques, and they hadn't begun transcribing even after being reminded by others. Even when they finally came to their senses due to others' reminders, they still transcribed intermittently, unable to resist looking back and reading. Few were as focused as Li Fan, writing tirelessly and paying no attention to the techniques. Paper and ink seemed endless, and soon Li Fan finished transcribing the technique in his hands. He returned it to the bookshelf and picked up another one. Li Fan's indifferent behavior caught the attention of some people. After some contemplation, they also gave up the idea of trying to memorize the techniques. They focused on transcribing instead. As for those still immersed in the techniques, they didn't have the kindness to remind them. Time passed day by day. Transcribing continuously was a monotonous and arduous task. With the previous lesson in mind, nobody dared to use their magical powers to cheat. Soon, some couldn't endure it. They couldn't help but stop to take a break. Some closed their eyes and rested for a while, then immediately resumed transcribing. Some thoroughly rested before regrouping. Li Fan, however, never rested for a moment. There were about 2 or 3 others like Li Fan, seemingly tireless, likely due to their good endurance and mental strength from practicing cultivation techniques. Even after staying awake for a very long time, there was no apparent exhaustion. Li Fan persisted unendingly, because he was clear that in this trial, Qin Tang's evaluation was not only based on the quantity of transcribed techniques and the number of mistakes made but also on an essential criterion, the duration from the moment one picked up the brush to when they put it down. As Qin Tang had mentioned earlier, this trial was about focus. Since they started transcribing techniques, Stopping for any reason would mean a disruption in that focus. Li Fan was single-minded, immersed in transcribing the techniques. All physical and mental fatigue was forcibly suppressed. He didn't know how much time had passed. Oh, I had such a good sleep. Qin Tang's voice suddenly echoed in Li Fan's ear. He stretched lazily, and the pen and paper in front of Li Fan disappeared. The time is up, let me see how you've performed. Tisk tisk tisk, it's really worse than the previous years. Qin Tang squinted as if inspecting something and shook his head repeatedly. Oh, wait a moment. This is interesting. As if he had discovered something, he glanced towards Li Fan, a hint of a smile appearing at the corner of his mouth. But Qin Tang didn't say anything more, he quickly withdrew his gaze. The first trial is now over. Rest for a day, and on the day after tomorrow, we'll begin the second trial. He clapped his hands, and Li Fan felt a sudden shift in his surroundings. In the blink of an eye, he was back in the tall building where he had slept earlier. Qin Tang's figure didn't appear this time. The cultivators finally relaxed. They were excited, sharing their thoughts with each other. This was a real stroke of luck. I transcribed while memorizing, and I recorded a total of 15 techniques. Most of them are golden core techniques, and a few are nascent soul techniques. I recorded quite a few as well. What's the use of recording so many? It only matters if we survive. That's not entirely true. With my abilities, if everything goes as expected, I'll probably stop at foundation establishment in this lifetime. Now, I have the rare opportunity to glimpse into the mysteries of nascent soul techniques. Even if I die tomorrow, I'll have no regrets. Friend, you speak to my heart. Some people are just stubborn and won't listen to good advice. HMPH. Apart from the arguments, some cultivators began eyeing the belongings of those who had perished. Unfortunately, after some investigation, they all wore disappointed expressions. Li Fan even heard someone nearby sneering, "Don't bother. I checked that night. After being killed by Qin Tang, all the storage rings, magical items, and the like on their bodies disappeared, not a trace left." Li Fan shook his head upon hearing this, preparing to go back and rest. But then, almost by accident, he saw a corpse. Chapter 82, Trial of Courage. It was indeed the corpse of Zhao Shuyuan. After 3 months had passed, it gradually revealed something unusual. Unlike normal flesh and blood, it looked more like withered wood, presenting a yellowish color. Li Fan kicked it, and the sound was exactly like kicking on wood. At this moment, a voice came from behind Li Fan. "This is just a puppet, not the real body. It's Zhao Shuyuan's usual method. Fellow Taoist, there's no need to be surprised," said the voice. Li Fan turned around and saw that the speaker was also a qi condensation stage cultivator. He immediately cupped his hands. "Thank you for the guidance. Is the fellow Taoist also a member of the 10,000 Immortals Alliance?" The person nodded. "Yes, I am Chen En. I've been a member of the 10,000 Immortals Alliance for over 30 years. I'm Li Fan." From what the fellow Taoist said, it seems you are quite familiar with Zhao Shuyuan. Chen En smiled. "Familiar is not the right word. But, you know some things after living here for so long. Take Zhao Shuyuan, for example. He opened a grocery store called 1,000 Mile Hall on the island, selling everything. It is said he has official connections with the 10,000 Immortals Alliance, and occasionally he can sell some good stuff. In addition, he often does some intelligence business. However, this guy never takes risks himself, he always uses puppets to pave the way." Li Fan nodded after hearing this. "Greedy for money and afraid of death, I see." Chen En laughed heartily. Fellow Taoist summarized it perfectly. "Greedy for money and afraid of death," describes Zhao Shuyuan very accurately. After the laughter, Chen En suddenly said, "When we were transcribing the techniques in the book pavilion before, I saw others transcribing for a while and then taking a break when tired. They would transcribe again after recharging. Only you, fellow Taoist, didn't rest for 3 months. I truly admire that. But I wonder, fellow Taoist, what's the profound meaning behind your actions? If we only consider the speed of transcription, after all, when you stopped due to physical and mental exhaustion later on, you were certainly slower than those who took frequent breaks. I don't know if you can enlighten me on this," Chen En asked respectfully. Li Fan contemplated for a moment before speaking. "I dare not claim a profound meaning, it's just a gut feeling. Regarding what Qin Tang said about the first trial being about focus, to be focused means having undivided attention. Not being disturbed by any external factors can be called true focus. Is physical and mental fatigue also an external factor? If you stop because of it, doesn't that mean you're no longer focused? It's just a humble opinion, you can take it as you wish, Li Fan humbly said. Chen seemed lost in thought upon hearing this. Li Fan didn't say anything further and returned to the room to rest. The next day, Qin Tang did not appear again. No one dared to run around, and they just patiently waited inside the building. On the third day, early in the morning, Qin Tang appeared in front of everyone while staggering and drinking wine. Good wine, good wine. After burping, he squinted at the group of cultivators. Today, we start the second trial. This time, I will test your courage. On the path of immortality, there are countless hardships and challenges. Do you have the courage to face them all? Qin Tang smiled faintly. The crowd felt a momentary dizziness and suddenly found themselves by the seashore. Their own cultivation realm was sealed, and they became no different from an ordinary person. However, Qin Tang was nowhere to be seen. Only his voice came from afar. I'll wait for you on the other side of the sea. Use your courage to cross this vast ocean. Hearing this, everyone looked at each other. Some brave individuals walked to the edge of the sea and took a step forward. The sea instantly froze into ice and safely held the person. The person was overjoyed and continued to walk forward, quickly disappearing from the sight of the others. The remaining people, seeing someone take the lead, hurriedly walked into the sea. Li Fan noticed Bai Li Chen doing the same and followed into the sea. However, Sikong Yi remained by the shore, not moving. Li Fan didn't pay further attention and focused on traversing the sea. The water under his feet solidified into ice, but there was no trace of the others in his field of vision. On the vast sea, he was left alone in an instant. Li Fan remained composed, steadily moving forward step by step. The sun rose and set above him, and he lost track of how much time had passed. The scenery Li Fan saw remained unchanged. It seemed like this vast sea had no end. Even though Li Fan knew the solution in advance, various feelings of powerlessness and hesitation arose within him. At this moment, Li Fan could feel the thickness of the ice beneath his feet gradually decreasing. Taking a deep breath, he dispelled the doubts in his heart. He continued resolutely moving forward. The ice beneath his feet solidified again. This second trial was testing courage. It was not only testing the courage to face external circumstances but also the courage to face one's own inner fears. On the vast sea, after walking for a long time, he still hadn't seen the opposite shore. Would doubts arise in your heart, wondering if you had lost your way? Would anxiety creep in, questioning whether this vast sea had an end? Would fear start to take over, robbing you of the courage to move forward? Or would you give up and stop moving forward? Li Fan walked step by step, questioning his own heart. Even after hundreds of years of reincarnation, he had never experienced anything like this. Temporarily putting aside all external matters, he contemplated while walking. This journey across the ice was like the path of immortality. The road ahead was boundless, and the endpoint was not visible. Halfway through, looking around, he couldn't be certain if he had lost his direction. From start to finish, he was alone, with nothing to rely on. Time passed, and it seemed like he would walk like this forever. Endlessly. Even so, could you still firmly hold on to your faith and never lose the courage to move forward? Even though you knew that this trial would eventually end. But Li Fan had wavered in his heart as well. Because this journey across the sea seemed to last forever. A year, 2 years. Decades passed. Li Fan's hair turned gray, his body hunched over, and he still didn't stop his steps. Until his body became too old and he could no longer walk. He collapsed weakly on the surface of the sea. His vision became blurry, and before losing consciousness, Li Fan seemed to see it. On the coast not far ahead, Qin Tang, dressed in white, stood there in solitude. He raised his wine gourd towards Li Fan and took a sip, smiling. Opening his eyes, Li Fan found that he and the other cultivators were still in that building. However, a long time had passed compared to the memories, and many people looked dazed. After a long time, they regained their clarity. Crossing the Nine Nether River is easy, but crossing the sea within one's heart is difficult. The second trial of courage has ended. 2 days from now, early in the morning, we will proceed to the final trial. After saying this, Qin Tang, with his ever-present wine gourd, shook his head and left. Chapter 83. Trial of Eternity. Crossing the sea within one's heart is difficult. Upon hearing Qin Tang's words, some of the cultivators present seemed lost in thought, as if they had grasped something. Others seemed indifferent, paying no attention. And so, the second day quickly passed. Early on the third day, Qin Tang, as usual, appeared before the eyes of everyone. However, this time, he didn't drink. He appeared sober, much more spirited than before. Today is the final trial. Qin Tang assessed the cultivators present with a serious expression. On the path of cultivation, you will always encounter countless challenges and temptations. Will you be able to persevere and stay true to your initial intentions? Let me wait and see. In Qin Tang's words, everyone felt a sudden darkness before losing consciousness. In a small village amidst the mountains and fields, Li Fan lay on the roof, watching the setting sun. He had a feeling that he had forgotten something. Growing up in this mountain village, he led a simple and happy life, working with the sunrise and resting with the sunset every day. It was a plain and fulfilling life. If he continued like this, it didn't seem bad at all. But there was a vague restlessness in his heart, a feeling that he shouldn't end his life so ordinarily. Fan, where are you? Come home for dinner. Li Fan remained unmoved by his mother's call. He looked up at the sky, at the birds soaring freely, at the sun and moon, ancient and steadfast, not subject to human will, lost in thought. He spent the whole night like this until dawn was approaching. Suddenly, it seemed like he had a realization. In a swift motion, he jumped down from the house. He rushed into the house and loudly said to his still sleeping mother, "Mother, cancel the marriage arrangement with the girl next door. I'm not getting married. I want to cultivate immortality." His mother was alarmed by the abrupt statement, thinking her child had gone mad, and hurriedly got up to hold Li Fan's hand. "What immortal are you talking about? There's no such thing as immortality. Wake up, my child." Li Fan pulled away from his mother's grip, his youthful face full of determination. "I don't know where the immortals are, but I will definitely find them." With that said, he, in the midst of his mother's tears, packed his belongings and strode out of the door. 6 months later, while exploring in the mountains, Li Fan tragically fell into a tiger's mouth and lost his life. In front of the dilapidated Taoist temple, amidst the flickering fire and the cries of the people, Li Fan felt lost. "Senior brother, master is dead. What should we do after we leave Ascending Cloud sect?" a timid voice asked by his side. Li Fan was about to speak when he heard angry voices from all around. "What else can we do? Of course, everyone should divide the things in the temple and leave the mountain. We thought there was a real immortal on the mountain, that's why everyone endured hardships to come up. Who would have thought this old Taoist was an out-and-out fraud? Yeah, can a real immortal suddenly fall ill and die like this?" As everyone got more and more agitated, Li Fan didn't know how to explain, so he let them plunder and empty the Ascending Cloud sect. After a while, only Li Fan remained alone on the mountain. He collected his master's ashes and buried them. Li Fan thought about the look in his master's eyes before he passed away. Unwillingness, regret, sorrow, hope. Was his master a fraud? Was the ascending to the clouds scripture he imparted just a fabrication? Li Fan felt that perhaps it wasn't what everyone thought. Perhaps immortals truly existed. In the end, Li Fan still didn't leave the mountain. He spent the latter half of his life alone in the Taoist temple, watching the clouds change and the days pass. He spent his days comprehending the ascending to the clouds scripture. He was over 50 years old, but he couldn't make any progress. He passed away with regrets. In the imperial palace, Li Fan looked at the wooden plaques on the golden plate in front of him, filled with names, and a trace of impatience appeared in his eyes. "Take them away. Tonight, I still want to cultivate. Your Majesty, you haven't visited the palace concubines in 3 months. A flash of fierceness passed through Li Fan's eyes. "I will comply with your Majesty's orders." Watching the eunuch supervisor leave in fear, Li Fan snorted. The position of emperor is truly tedious. A thought suddenly surfaced in his mind. His purpose was to scour the resources of the entire country for his cultivation. Externally, he still appeared to be an ordinary human, but in reality, he had already stepped into the realm of golden core. Worldly matters were so boring. With this in mind, 3 months later, during the morning court, Li Fan vanished into thin air in front of the civil and military officials. For the next 216 years, while exploring an ancient subworld mansion, Li Fan unfortunately fell victim to an assassination plot. He died, vanishing from the world of cultivation. At the Lingyun sect, why is this tribulation cloud taking so long to condense and descend? The might of this heavenly tribulation seems stronger than when the sect master ascended back then, right? Of course, in terms of strength alone, Junior Martial Brother can be considered the strongest in our sect in 1,000 years. Li Fan looked at the increasing might of the tribulation cloud above the Lingyun peak and felt a surge of confidence. After 300 years of cultivation, what fear did he have of a mere heavenly tribulation? A beam of sword light shot up into the sky from the Lingyun peak. Splitting the sky, it cut through the tribulation clouds. Sunlight poured down through the rift in the tribulation clouds, illuminating the Lingyun peak. Flowers fell from the sky, and the gates to the immortal realm opened. Li Fan flew into the immortal gates without a moment's hesitation. In the immortal realm, Li Fan was infuriated to discover that all the senior martial brothers who had ascended 2,000 years ago had been mysteriously killed by an unknown enemy. While practicing and searching for the culprit, he was suddenly ambushed by a close friend during an exploration of an ancient cultivation secret realm and died in a state of shock and unwillingness. In the northern immortal region. Since the unification of the Qingtian immortal region by Emperor Fanshan 2,000 years ago, a bloody conquest had begun. In these years, with the heads of 5 immortal emperors and 16 immortal kings, Emperor Fanshan had gained an infamous reputation. In the end, only the northern immortal region was barely holding on in the entire immortal realm. Now, the army was pressing in, vowing to overthrow the northern immortal region within a year. In the center of the army, Qin Tang looked at the Fanshan emperor who was resting with closed eyes, hesitating whether to speak or not. Li Fan opened his eyes and looked at Qin Tang, his trusted confidant who had come a long way with him, and rarely showed a faint smile. Qin Tang, it seems like you have something to ask me. I won't hide it, Your Majesty. There is indeed something I don't understand. Feel free to ask. Since Your Majesty started as a mere mortal and experienced countless hardships, eventually achieving the position of a heavenly emperor, your power is overwhelming. All the immortals in the immortal realm tremble at your name. But why does Your Majesty never seem to stop? What is it that you relentlessly pursue? After annihilating the Zhaoshan Emperor and completely unifying the immortal realm, what plans does Your Majesty have? Qin Tang stared at Li Fan, expressing the doubts in his heart. Hee. Li Fan chuckled lightly. What I seek is simply the phrase, eternal life, he said calmly. Qin Tang was dumbfounded, seemingly unable to believe his ears. Eternal life? With Your Majesty's current cultivation, can't it already be considered eternal life? If there are no accidents, even if Your Majesty lives for millions of years, it shouldn't be difficult, right? He asked in astonishment, finding it hard to understand. 100,000 years of life, can it be called eternal life? Li Fan smiled and counter-questioned. In the burial mound, hundreds of ancient immortal emperors have long turned into dry bones in their graves. Even the ancient immortals rumored to have created the immortal realm and possessing supreme power are now nothing more than ashes beneath the mountains, suppressed under my palace. Now, I intend to unify the immortal realm, gather the power of all the immortals, and create a grand formation covering the entire immortal realm. Through this, I will break free from the supposed ancient restriction on immortality. I want to step above the immortals and advance even further. Li Fan's tone was casual, but resolute, leaving no room for dissent. Qin Tang fell silent, because he knew that there was nothing beyond the immortal realm. So all he could do was lower his head in silence. Everything proceeded according to Li Fan's plan. In just 1 year, Li Fan unified the entire immortal realm. After this, he used extremely brutal methods to suppress all opposing opinions. He collected resources from all over the immortal realm and successfully created the grand formation to break the shackles of the immortal realm. As the formation was activated, the entire immortal realm trembled. Countless cracks appeared in the sky, and it seemed like everything in the world was shattering. Li Fan laughed heartily and rushed into the cracks. What awaited him was only endless darkness. Thus, the trial of eternity had come to an end. Because Qin Tang knew there was no need to continue the test. In this trial, an anomaly appeared. Even if he constructed an infinite world, it seemed he couldn't wear down this person's unwavering determination. If the master was here, witnessing such a prodigy, he would probably be very pleased. But it's a pity. A tinge of sorrow flashed in Qin Tang's eyes. Letting out a long sigh, everyone gradually awoke from the illusion. However, they were still in the same square as at the very beginning. Some were dazed, some woke up and turned pale, and some seemed to have a moment of realization. Chin Tang looked at the various cultivators with different reactions and smiled, saying, the 3 trials have come to an end. Among you, some have exceeded my expectations, and some are just not up to par. The sect master once said to me that in Cloudwater Heavenly Palace, quality matters more than quantity. He looked at the people, his expression gentle. Therefore, among you, I'll let half stay. The cultivators who were originally happy upon hearing Chin Tang's words suddenly changed their expressions upon learning that he intended to kill half of those present. What do you mean? They knew well how they performed in the 3 trials. Now, upon hearing that Chin Tang wanted to kill half of them, they were shocked and angry. With no way out, they launched an attack against Chin Tang. Chin Tang remained unruffled. He just smiled calmly, saying, Chin Tang, chief of the teaching hall at Cloudwater Heavenly Palace. I invite you all to advise me. With Chin Tang's words, blue figures suddenly appeared around half of the cultivators. They were like mirror images of the targets, identical in appearance, aura, and even strength. As soon as they appeared, they launched relentless attacks on their targets. The sect master is stern. But the master once told me not to be ruthless in our actions. If you can survive from your own mirror image, I won't trouble you further. Seeing the struggling cultivators, Chin Tang spoke slowly. The other half of the cultivators who weren't attacked, including Li Fan, chose to move away from the battlefield to avoid being affected. Li Fan retreated to a safe place and observed the situation in the field. The blue mirror images were extremely fierce in their attacks, tireless and immune to harm. Ordinary cultivators were no match for them. In no time, many cultivators met their end under their own mirror images. As more cultivators died, those left struggling wouldn't last much longer. Cornered, they began to curse Chin Tang. Snap out of it. Why are you still accepting disciples? Cloudwater Heavenly Palace has been destroyed for countless years. What nonsense, master and senior brother. Under the great calamity, they're all going to kill each other. Kill each other. Chin Tang shook his head repeatedly at these words. In Cloudwater Heavenly Palace, we are united. We respect and love each other. Even if we must sacrifice ourselves for our fellow disciples, there wouldn't be much hesitation. How could we possibly kill each other? As Chin Tang spoke, his voice suddenly lowered. The great calamity, the great calamity. He frowned, as if recalling something. The great calamity, he repeated in a low voice continuously, and the sky over the square suddenly darkened. The blue phantom figures attacking the group of cultivators also underwent a transformation. Thick darkness continuously surged from within the phantoms. In an instant, the phantoms turned into a terrifying ink-black color. The ink-black mirror images were much more ferocious than the previous blue phantoms. In the blink of an eye, most of the struggling cultivators were killed. Only a few remained, barely hanging on. Chin Tang, however, hadn't recovered from his trance. He was still murmuring. The ground in the square began to shake violently, and the sky was pressed down by heavy clouds. Lightning and thunder incessantly roared. The cultivators who hadn't been attacked by the mirror images and were watching from the sidelines suddenly felt something amiss. But facing Chin Tang, who was already entranced, no one dared to act rashly. For a moment, everyone didn't know what to do. At this moment, Li Fan slowly walked to Chin Tang's side. He carried a wine gourd and patted Chin Tang's shoulder, offering it to him. With a faint smile, Li Fan said to Chin Tang, Senior Chin, have a drink. Don't worry, there's really no great calamity at all. Chin Tang turned around, sniffed the air, and instinctively took the wine gourd and drank from it. Then, he looked at Li Fan with some confusion. No great calamity. Li Fan nodded confidently and repeated, exactly, there is no great calamity. Chin Tang's eyes gradually brightened, repeating murmurs of, no great calamity, no great calamity, no great calamity. Ha ha ha, you're right, there's really no great calamity. After a long time, Chin Tang burst into laughter and finally returned to normal. The anomaly in the square also disappeared, and everything returned to normalcy. Seeing this, everyone breathed a sigh of relief and expressed grateful looks towards Li Fan. However, Li Fan suddenly had a thought. He sensed that there were 2 faint killing intents locked onto him. Although these killing intents were extremely weak, Li Fan was very sensitive to them and wouldn't make a mistake. And the owners of these 2 killing intents were none other than Sikong Yi and Bai Li Chen. Li Fan pretended not to notice and secretly locked onto the 2 through the formless killing intent. But he didn't take action. The brief episode quickly passed, and the battle between the cultivators and the blue mirror images came to an end. In the end, only 2 fortunate cultivators survived. Qin Tang looked at the surviving cultivators with a gentle expression. The trial is over, you may go. The cultivators were puzzled and were about to speak, but they saw each other's figures gradually fading and disappearing from the square. Soon, only Li Fan was left in the square. Qin Tang looked at Li Fan, a complex expression flickering in his eyes. Why aren't you leaving? Qin Tang asked. Li Fan smiled calmly. Senior brother, you owe me a good bottle of wine. Seemingly surprised by Li Fan's response, Qin Tang was momentarily taken aback, and then burst into laughter. Exactly, I owe you a good bottle of wine. His expression suddenly changed, and he looked at Li Fan seriously. Extending his right hand, he lightly tapped Li Fan's forehead with his index finger. This, cloud water illusory dream art, is a technique I created, painstakingly integrating all my lifelong learning. I hope you won't let it go to waste. After a while, Qin Tang retracted his finger. Li Fan's figure also slowly disappeared. In front of him was a towering gate with 4 characters engraved on it, Cloudwater Heavenly Palace. Below the gate stood a broken statue. The statue was in a terrible state, covered in wounds. It appeared to have been pierced through the heart, revealing a huge hollow. Through the blurry face of the statue, Qin Tang's appearance could still be vaguely seen. Li Fan silently watched the statue for a moment, then took out a wine gourd from his storage ring. He placed it gently in front of the statue. Then, activating the stalking shadow technique, he swiftly headed towards the direction where the formless killing intent had locked onto. Chapter 84. Demon Refining Gu Taoist. The remains of the Cloudwater Heavenly Palace were incredibly vast. Even in his previous life, after over a decade of continuous exploration by cultivators from the Kongyun Sea, the complete layout had not been fully revealed. Not to mention the current situation, where the entire Cloudwater Heavenly Palace was shrouded in dense mist. The cultivators who awakened from the stone statue of Qin Tang soon split into several different factions. Some felt that the interior of the Cloudwater Heavenly Palace was extremely perilous. To survive under Qin Tang's subordinates was already a great stroke of luck. If they continued to explore, they would undoubtedly face certain death. On the other hand, some believed that with just a stone statue at the entrance of this palace, they had already gained such an opportunity. What kind of great fortune might await inside the rumored alchemy rooms, teaching halls, and treasure vaults? Once greed arose, it rapidly expanded in their hearts and could no longer be suppressed. Thus, these people, as if possessed, disappeared one after another into the mist. So, when Li Fan caught up from behind, he found that he had lost the trace of all the cultivators. If it weren't for the fact that the killing intent had already locked onto Sikong Yi and the others in advance, he would likely have lost them. However, strangely, Sikong Yi and Bai Li Chen seemed to be very familiar with the layout of the Cloudwater Heavenly Palace. They could always find a way through the seemingly impassable mist. Their objectives were clear, constantly bypassing buildings shrouded in mist, moving deeper inside. Was this the reason why Sikong Yi managed to obtain the Cloudwater map in the previous life? After all, Li Fan had knowledge of the simulated experiences from his previous life, so he could understand the various secrets within the Cloudwater Heavenly Palace. But how did Sikong Yi know all this? Li Fan's interest was suddenly piqued. At the same time, he became increasingly vigilant. These 2 individuals obviously had significant secrets. He concealed his presence even more, closely trailing behind them. Suddenly, the actions of the 2 came to a halt. They stopped in their tracks, and Sikong Yi and Bai Li Chen separated, each heading in an opposite direction. Splitting up, have they discovered me? Li Fan squinted, hesitated for a moment, and then followed the direction in which Sikong Yi had left. Entering deeper into the mist, he arrived at a tower-like structure. Sikong Yi suddenly stopped at the base of the tower, turned back toward the direction where Li Fan was, and showed a provocative smile. Then he promptly entered the tower. Quite interesting. Are you trying to kill me using the peril of the Cloudwater Heavenly Palace? Li Fan looked at the eerie tower in front of him, shrouded in white mist, and the memories from his previous life involuntarily surged in his mind. The Demon Refining Tower, one of the most dangerous areas in the Cloudwater Heavenly Palace. In the first 10 years of the Cloudwater Heavenly Palace's opening, no cultivator had ever returned alive from the Demon Refining Tower. It was once regarded as a forbidden zone within the Cloudwater Heavenly Palace by cultivators from the Kongyun Sea. In the previous life, it was finally cracked only after anchoring it for 21 years. A master alchemist risked his life to enter and eventually deciphered its bizarre rules. If this is your plan, I'm afraid I'll disappoint you, Li Fan sneered and also entered the demon refining tower. Upon entering, he felt gusts of cold wind, accompanied by a foul and putrid smell that assaulted him. The bottom of the tower consisted of prison cells. However, it seemed that much time had passed, and the prison cells were now filled only with peculiar and monstrous skeletal remains. Li Fan continued upwards, and the second floor was similar. He reached the top of the tower. In the distance, he could hear a murmuring voice. All the senior brothers and sisters are fighting at the front line, and I can't help much. I must refine more pills so that I can enhance their strength as much as possible. For every extra pill I refine, the possibility of senior brothers and sisters surviving increases. But the monsters and demons inside this demon refining tower are all dead, and without the alchemy materials, what should I do? A disheveled man wearing a loose blue robe was lamenting and seemed at a loss. Beside him, suspended in midair, were 3 figures bound by invisible ropes. One of them was Sikong Yi. The other 2 were cultivators who had entered the Cloudwater Heavenly Palace together this time, but for some reason had ended up here. These 2 had pale faces, and their lips were moving, but no sound came out. Li Fan hadn't made any moves yet, and he suddenly felt as if his hands and feet were bound by ropes, unable to move. He was then drawn into the air and fixed in place, just like the other 3. Having anticipated this encounter, Li Fan remained unfazed. It was at this moment that he clearly heard the self-talk of the man. Oh my, it's time to refine the pills. At this moment, the man in the blue robe suddenly woke up from his murmuring. Refining pills, refining pills. The man reached into his loose, wide robe and moved around. In no time, he took out 2 black pills. The pills are ready, just don't know how effective they'll be this time. The man scratched his head, seemingly troubled. Then, he slapped his thigh. Right, I just captured a few bugs. It's perfect to use them for the experiment. Saying this, he looked towards Li Fan and the others, who were suspended in the air, his gaze constantly shifting. Which bug should I choose? Seeing that the man had fixed his gaze on them, a strange chill ran through them. They all became still, not daring to move, and held their breath, maintaining silence. Let's choose this one, said the man in the blue robe after looking at them for a while, and he reached out to grab one. Seeing this, the person couldn't maintain their calm anymore. But their struggles were obviously in vain, and they could no longer make any sound. Their bodies flew towards the man in the blue robe, gradually shrinking in the process. In the end, they truly turned into a small flying insect and fell into the man's palm. The head of the flying insect still faintly resembled a human face, with an expression of extreme fear. Gently pinched by the man in the blue robe, the human-faced insect emitted a buzzing sound from its trembling wings. However, it was all in vain. The man in the blue robe held the insect in one hand and a black pill in the other. The pill was many times larger than the flying insect, yet it was forcibly stuffed inside the insect. The human-faced insect struggled in pain, forcefully swallowing the pill. Its belly swelled many times over, becoming a giant round ball. The insect's breath gradually weakened, but the suffering had only just begun. After the pill entered its belly, it seemed to be digested, and its size began to decrease. However, a buzzing sound, like a swarm of mosquitoes, suddenly resounded. The body of the human-faced insect began to convulse uncontrollably. Tiny black dots emerged one after another from its abdomen. Looking closely, these black dots were newly born insects. After emerging from the body, the insects didn't fly around randomly but stopped on the human-faced insect and greedily began to gnaw. Soon, the human-faced insect was devoured completely. The man in the blue robe shook his head, looking regretful. It seems the test failed. The potency of the medicine was probably too strong. Saying this, he opened his mouth and sucked the black mist of the insect into his stomach. Even though Li Fan had heard about the events in the demon refining tower beforehand and was mentally prepared, he still couldn't help but feel a jolt in his eyelids. The scene was too horrifying. The man in the blue robe looked at the remaining black pill in his hand, seemingly a bit distressed. Should I try this pill again? He glanced at Li Fan and the others. All 3 of them held their breath, immobilized. After a while, the man in the blue robe sighed. Forget it, it should be close enough, considering it was refined in a furnace. With that, the man opened his mouth and casually threw the black pill inside his mouth. After swallowing the pill, the man in the blue robe remained unaffected. However, he became even more deranged. He started muttering again, ignoring the three people bound in the air and talking about not having enough alchemy materials. Among the three survivors, Li Fan remained silent. Sikong Yi showed no expression. The remaining person was already in a state of collapse. I should have died in Qin Tang's hands earlier. At least I could have died quickly. Time in the demon refining tower seemed to lose its meaning. The lives of everyone depended entirely on the actions of the man in the blue robe. After an unknown amount of time, the man regained consciousness from his deranged state. Once again, he pulled out 2 pills from under his wide robe, but this time they were eerie green. Which insect should I choose for the experiment? The man hesitated this time, but his gaze landed on Sikong Yi. Let's choose this one. Li Fan suddenly became alert. He wanted to see what Sikong Yi was relying on to dare lead him into this perilous place. To Li Fan's surprise, Sikong Yi didn't put up any resistance. After being forced to transform into an insect and swallow the green pill, Sikong Yi turned into a puddle of green water immediately. Sikong Yi was dead. What's going on? Was there an unexpected change? Could it be that, in this life, because of my tracking, the development of events is different from the previous life? No, Sikong Yi clearly enticed me into this demon refining tower. How could he die so easily? Did he bring me into this death trap just to exchange life for a life? While Li Fan was immersed in endless doubts, he suddenly sensed something and looked up. Outside the demon refining tower, Bai Lycan, who was targeted by the formless killing intent, was slowly approaching. Beside him, Li Fan felt that the previously lost lock-ons of the formless killing intent had once again captured the target, Sikong Yi. Sikong Yi, who was supposed to be dead, had reappeared outside the demon refining tower. A puppet, an external incarnation, it doesn't feel like either. Li Fan stared at the puddle of green water on the ground, unable to help but laugh. It seems that the secrets these two hold are even bigger than I imagined. However, once I lock onto them, these secrets will no longer be secrets. In Li Fan's senses, Sikong Yi and Bai Li Chen continued to advance towards the Cloudwater Heavenly Palace. There's the lock-on with the formless killing intent, I'm not afraid they'll escape. I just need to extricate myself from this demon refining tower as soon as possible. However, the actions of the man in the blue robe followed their own patterns, and Li Fan couldn't control them. All he could do was wait patiently. Soon, the third round of drug testing arrived. This time, Li Fan still wasn't chosen. This left him somewhat bemused, not knowing whether it was lucky or unlucky. The man in the blue robe took out 2 pink pills and fed them to the human-faced insect. With a bang, the insect exploded into pink smoke. In the smoke, painful faces kept appearing. As the pink mist drifted, the faces contorted and twisted, appearing even more grotesque and terrifying. Li Fan, witnessing this scene, couldn't help but shiver with goosebumps. In the end, it was the man in the blue robe who, muttering to himself, inhaled the smoke, finally ending this eternal agony. The man in the blue robe fell into mumbling again. The 4th round of drug testing finally arrived. At this point, only Li Fan remained inside the demon refining tower. The man in the blue robe was about to pick Li Fan for the test, but Li Fan suddenly spoke up. Junior brother, I heard you don't have enough alchemy materials. The Gu Taoist one, upon hearing this, instinctively stopped his reaching hand and nodded, somewhat guilty. Yes, I don't have enough alchemy materials. I haven't been able to produce new pills for a long time. He said with a hint of remorse, I can't make good pills, and my progress in cultivation has been slow. I've been a burden to everyone. The Gu Taoist's words faltered, and he looked at Li Fan for a while, realizing what he was wearing. He became a bit flustered. Oh, it's senior brother. I thought it was just another insect. Senior brother, I'm really sorry. I'll release you right away. With the Gu Taoist's words, Li Fan felt the restraints loosen, regaining control of his body. The Gu Taoist held his head, lowering it as if unable to face this senior brother. He said in self-blame, I messed up again. Every time it's like this. I can't make good pills, and my cultivation progress has been slow. I've been a burden to everyone. Li Fan approached and held the Gu Taoist's shoulder, saying gently, don't say that, junior brother. The pills you make have great effects, and everyone likes them. Upon hearing this, the Gu Taoist suddenly lifted his head, eyes filled with joy. Really, senior brother, everyone likes the pills I make. Why, don't you believe your senior brother? Li Fan put on a stern face. The Gu Taoist hurriedly shook his head. I believe everything senior brother says. Then he dejectedly said, but I don't have any more alchemy materials. I can't make the pills everyone likes. Li Fan patted the Gu Taoist's head and said softly, it's okay, I'm still here. Turn me into a pill, and everyone will have pills to eat again. Senior brother, you. The Gu Taoist seemed shocked by Li Fan's words, staring at him wide-eyed. Li Fan sighed deeply and continued, although I joined the sect early, my talent isn't enough, and my cultivation has always been low. Senior brothers and senior sisters are fighting on the front lines, and I can't help much. Every time I think about this, my heart aches, hating my own incompetence. So, turn me into a pill. That way, I can still help a little. Li Fan grabbed the Gu Taoist's hand, excitedly saying. The Gu Taoist stared at Li Fan, seemingly deeply moved. So, senior brother is just like me. But senior brother is much greater than me. He'd rather sacrifice himself to help the senior brothers and sisters on the front lines. And me, I just keep avoiding my problems. Hiding in this tower. The Gu Taoist twisted his hair in distress. No, I can't just watch senior brother sacrifice himself. He seemed to suddenly realize something, and excitedly said to Li Fan, Senior brother, I can refine pills for you. As long as you eat the pills I refine, your strength will definitely not be low, and you can help on the front lines. The Gu Taoist seemed to have found a goal to strive for. Pill refining, I want to refine pills. He reached into his wide robe and started fumbling. Not long after, he took out 2 golden pills. Senior brother, here are the pills for you. The Gu Taoist held them in his hands, his face beaming with a smile, offering the pills to Li Fan. Li Fan didn't accept the pills but instead untied the Gu Taoist's robe. Under the wide robe, only an empty skeleton remained. On the skeleton, there were only a few traces of barely visible flesh and blood. The Gu Taoist used his own flesh and blood to refine pills. Asterisk 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 asterisk. TL note. GU equals Chinese poisonous insect refining. Chapter 85. All things are like insects. Watching this horrifying scene before him, Li Fan was moved. This is indeed an anomaly. Caught between life and death, between clarity and confusion, bound by obsessions, one can only follow established rules and repeat the eternal cycle. Unable to break free, Qin Tang was like this, and so was this Gu Taoist. Seeing that Li Fan didn't respond, the Gu Taoist held up 2 golden pills and waved them in front of him. Senior brother, pills. He looked at Li Fan with hope. However, Li Fan shook his head regretfully. My aptitude is too poor. Even if I eat this pill, my cultivation won't increase much. So, I definitely can't take this pill. I'll leave it for the senior brothers with better aptitude, it'll be more useful for them. The Gu Taoist was a bit disappointed and was about to persuade him. Li Fan continued, however, I would like to ask junior brother for a favor. I don't know if junior brother is willing to agree. The Gu Taoist became happy again. Of course, I agree. Senior brother, what's your request? Just tell me. I want to learn from junior brother the method of capturing insects, Li Fan said slowly. Anomalies have their own rules. If you don't follow the rules of the anomaly, you will surely die under the anomaly. But if you understand the rules, you can not only stay unharmed in the anomaly but also gain various benefits from it. Like the previous statue in the Qin Tang's trial. In Qin Tang's trial, if you performed well in all 3 tests, you could ask Qin Tang for help before leaving, using good wine. Qin Tang would then help based on the specific performance in the tests, either by enhancing one's cultivation or by imparting a technique. In the case of this Gu Taoist, if you chose to swallow the golden pills, you could obtain the Gu Taoist's alchemy technique. However, this alchemy technique is not a normal alchemy practice. It's the way of insect pills. Not only are the materials for alchemy mostly from various bizarre flying insects, but the resulting pills also resemble flying insects. What's more deadly is that the more insect pills you refine, the more you will gradually become like the Gu Taoist. Becoming an inhuman, ghostly existence. So Li Fan did not choose the golden pills as a reward, but chose something else, which was completely comparable to the way of insect pills. When the Gu Taoist heard Li Fan's words, he touched the back of his head somewhat embarrassedly. Senior brother, my insect binding technique is just something I play with usually. Why do you want to learn this? Li Fan explained seriously, our senior brothers are fighting on the front lines, and annoying insects may harass them. Although my strength is weak and I can't personally fight, if I learn your art of capturing insects, I can help the senior brothers by dealing with these annoying insects from the sidelines. Upon hearing this, the Gu Taoist suddenly realized, I didn't expect the insect binding technique to have such a use. Senior brother, you're really clever. Li Fan sincerely said, thank you, junior brother, for teaching me. The Gu Taoist was excited and blushed, okay, senior brother, I will teach you how to catch insects. With a buzzing sound, the Gu Taoist revealed 4 pairs of transparent wings. He reached behind him and tore off one. The wing, still wet with bloodstains, was handed to Li Fan. Li Fan gently touched it, and the transparent wing turned into a burst of radiance, absorbed into his body. At the same time, countless intersecting threads seemed to appear in the world before Li Fan's eyes. He felt as if he could manipulate these threads at will, weaving them into a giant net that captured all creatures in his field of vision. This is it, the insect binding technique. The illusion of the threads in front of him gradually disappeared, but Li Fan knew that he had obtained this extremely powerful technique. As long as the opponent's realm was lower than his own, once he activated the insect binding technique, he could instantly restrain the opponent. A cultivator bound by the insect binding technique couldn't be cast any of their supernatural techniques or abilities. They could only be like insects in a web, at the mercy of others. At first glance, this insect binding technique seemed to only be effective against cultivators lower in realm than oneself, making it seemingly not very useful. But that's not the case. You see, the realm does not necessarily represent actual combat power. When exploring outside, which cultivator doesn't have a few tricks up their sleeves? Under an unexpected outburst, even if the opponent's cultivation is higher, they wouldn't dare to guarantee they could retreat unharmed. However, with this insect binding technique, there was no such concern. As long as the opponent's realm was lower, they could ignore any miraculous trump cards and directly capture the opponent. It's most suitable for dealing with those whose realm is low but seem to have many secrets. The figures of Sikong Yi and Bai Li Chen flashed in Li Fan's mind. Having gained this technique, Li Fan didn't want to delay any longer. Junior brother, I have learned the insect binding technique. I will now go to the front lines to find our senior brothers. Take care, Li Fan said. The Gu Taoist was somewhat reluctant. Senior brother, you must be careful. Make sure to come back safely. And with Li Fan's departure, that worried expression slowly faded. After an unknown amount of time, in the quiet demon refining tower, the Gu Taoist's muttering once again echoed. Without alchemy materials, what should I do? ... Exiting the demon refining tower, Li Fan sensed the location of Sikong Yi and Bai Li Chen. They were very close to the central core area of Cloudwater Heavenly Palace, the Tai Hall. Information about the Tai Hall instantly appeared in Li Fan's mind. The Tai Hall is said to be the place where Cloudwater Heavenly Palace receives distinguished guests and holds sect discussions. There was no particular risk, but the situation was quite unique. Looking at Sikong Yi and Bai Li Chen, it seemed that they had stopped for some reason, moving slowly toward the central area. Li Fan instantly had a clear idea. He sneered and hurried towards the direction where the two were. In front of the Tai Hall, countless broken swords were inserted into the ground. The sword blades crisscrossed, forming a forest of swords blocking the way to the Tai Hall. Sikong Yi and Bai Li Chen were standing on the sword handles, walking towards the Tai Hall. With each step forward, a virtual shadow corresponding to the broken sword under their feet would appear above them. Then it pierced through their hearts. No blood spattered. After piercing, the virtual shadow would disappear. It wouldn't cause actual harm, and would only bring pain. The intense pain made them tremble uncontrollably, and sweat poured down their foreheads like raindrops. After a long time, they finally eased from this indescribable pain. The two took a deep breath and continued to step on the sword handles, moving forward. Another sword shadow pierced through. This was the reason why the speed of their progress was so slow. Although it was extremely painful, there was no retreat in their eyes. What they had worked so hard for was right in front of them, within reach. How could they possibly give up now? With firm determination, they gritted their teeth and continued to move forward. At this moment, they sensed someone approaching from behind. Looking back, they were shocked and couldn't help but exclaim, "It's you! How is this possible?" Chapter 86. The Revelation of the Cloudwater Map. Two voices sounded simultaneously, echoing in front of the Tai Hall. Impossible! How could you possibly come out alive from that cursed place? The two exclaimed in unison, their faces full of disbelief. In front of the forest of swords, Li Fan stood with his hands crossed, looking at the pale-faced Sikong Yi and Bai Li Chen, sneering without a word. He just stepped onto the sword hilts, like he was about to chase after them. The phantom sword pierced through, and an excruciating pain followed. Li Fan almost couldn't control his body and nearly fell down. Falling from the sword hilt wouldn't lead to death, but it would just teleport him back to the outer periphery of the sword forest, starting anew. Of course, if someone couldn't accept it and tried to fly over the top of the sword forest, then they would truly experience what it felt like to have 1,000 swords pierce through their hearts. This was the trial in front of the Tai Hall, the trial of the sword forest. As opposed to the other parts of the Cloudwater Celestial Palace, as long as you didn't act recklessly, there was no fatal danger here. At most, it was experiencing the feeling of being pierced through the heart by sword after sword. In the previous life, many cultivators endured the intense pain and passed through the sword forest, entering the interior of the Tai Hall. However, the hall was empty, completely devoid of anything. Could it be that the treasures in the Tai Hall were taken by Sikong Yi in the first place? The opportunity in this Tai Hall is the Cloudwater map. Although Li Fan could use the insect binding technique to capture these two now, he couldn't guarantee that he would be able to force them to reveal how they obtained the Cloudwater map. Li Fan knew there were methods of soul searching in the ancient cultivation world that forcibly read a cultivator's memories. Unfortunately, Li Fan didn't know how to perform them yet. So, to be on the safe side, he had to wait for these two to take out the Cloudwater map. Li Fan contemplated, and the azure flame illusionary spirit emerged in his mind. His body temperature gradually dropped, and Li Fan felt himself becoming extremely calm and rational. Nothing could disturb his state of mind. Stepping forward, he stood on the sword hilt. Although he could still feel the pain, Li Fan wasn't afraid. He took several steps forward in a row. To avoid scaring Sikong Yi and Bai Li Chen too much, he stopped and pretended to rest. Sikong Yi and Bai Li Chen, seeing that Li Fan was still alive, were greatly shocked. At this moment, seeing Li Fan getting closer and closer, they couldn't help but become anxious. At that moment, they became ruthless, clenched their teeth, and took a few violent steps towards the front. 4 sharp swords were added to their body at the same time, and the pain brought about was not as simple as simply adding up the pain of each sword. The agony multiplied several times, making it almost difficult for the duo to maintain the stability of their figures. Fortunately, they were able to stabilize themselves by supporting each other for a moment before they were about to fall. Seeing this, Li Fan also took 3 steps forward, and then he looked like he was having trouble maintaining his stance again. In this way, Li Fan always maintained a distance from the duo, pulling down the other's guard. But yet, he was threatening to catch up, giving them a sense of oppression. As if they were prey being chased by hounds, Sikong Yi and Bai Li Dust, step by step, were getting closer and closer to the Tai Hall. Eventually, they walked to the end of the sword forest. Jumping down from the hilt of the sword, the two of them fell to the ground as if they were deflated. However, with Li Fan pressing step by step behind them, getting closer and closer, they could not afford to rest. In a hurry, Bai Li Chen took out a blue token from his chest and shouted loudly in the direction of the Tai Hall. I am Bai Li Chen, the 165th generation direct disciple of the Cloudwater Celestial Palace, and I request an audience with Patriarch Tai. Bai Li Chen's voice echoed continuously. Li Fan abruptly stopped the steps he was about to take and stared ahead. The majestic Tai Hall seemed to come alive at this moment, slowly rising into the air amidst constant tremors. The ground beneath their feet started to shake. Boom! Boom! 4 thick legs like pillars emerged from below the Tai Hall and stomped forcefully on the ground. A hideous monster head appeared before Li Fan like a demon descending on the world. The broken swords in the sword forest kept trembling. Roar! Accompanied by a strange roar, a giant turtle finally fully manifested. The Tai Hall was carried on the back of the giant turtle. And as the giant turtle continued to howl, inside the Tai Hall, 2 giant black snakes crawled out. One moved forward, entwining itself around the head. The other moved backward, opening a huge bloody mouth, acting as the turtle's tail. If the massive creature of this turtle-snake combination was visually impressive enough, then the scenes on this creature's body were making Li Fan feel physically uncomfortable. Every inch of the monster's body was stabbed with broken swords. It was incredibly bloody, and one couldn't make out how many swords were actually stuck in the creature's body. At first glance, this monster seemed to be composed entirely of swords. And the small sword forest in front of the Tai Hall seemed like an extremely insignificant part of it. Cloudwater Celestial Palace's Patriarch Tai. So many years have passed, and he's still alive. Or has he become something anomalous like Qin Tang and the Jiu Taoist? Li Fan couldn't be sure. In the previous life, there was no rumor at all about this Patriarch Tai. Li Fan didn't dare to act recklessly for a moment and just observed from a distance. Bai Li Chen was extremely excited to see the true appearance of the Patriarch. He knelt down and kept kowtowing. Your name is Bai Li Chen. Are you a direct disciple of my Cloudwater Celestial Palace? An old voice rang out. The turtle snake monster slightly lowered its head, as if wanting to see Bai Li Chen's appearance clearly. Reporting to Patriarch Tai, disciple is from the Whisking Cloud lineage, Bai Li Chen replied with a trembling voice. Whisking Cloud, huh, the old voice seemed to be lost in memories. Yes, you indeed carry the Whisking Cloud lineage's aura. So, that kid still has descendants alive. The turtle snake monster vaguely felt that something was wrong. But he was already too old. So old that even simple thoughts became a problem. The pain from the countless broken swords on his body was like a malicious curse, constantly affecting his thinking. After a moment of fruitless contemplation, he slowly spoke, so, why did you wake me up? Bai Li Chen seemed to breathe a sigh of relief, suppressing his excited expression, and quickly said, disciple wishes to ask Patriarch for the Cloudwater map. The Cloudwater map. What is that? Let me think. After a moment, oh, so, it's this, not something significant. The turtle snake monster's tone carried a hint of nostalgia. Back then, Hanhai mentioned that this thing can only be given to the Cloudwater Celestial Palace disciples. Since you're a descendant of Whisking Cloud. Saying this, the turtle snake monster hesitated for a moment. Then he slowly said, in that case, I suppose it's fine to give it to you. Bai Li Chen's face revealed an ecstatic look, and he couldn't stop kowtowing. Thank you, Patriarch. Thank you, Patriarch. Just as the turtle snake monster was about to hand over the Cloudwater map to Bai Li Chen, a voice suddenly rang out. Hold on. Bai Li Chen and the turtle snake monster looked towards the direction of the voice. They saw Li Fan swiftly approaching, stepping through the sword hilts. Swords continuously passed through his body, but the pain seemed to have no effect on him. Li Fan took 3 steps and glided through the sword forest, then descended gracefully. Sighing in relief, Li Fan cupped his hands towards the turtle snake monster. Disciple Li Fan, also a direct disciple of the Cloudwater Celestial Palace. I also wish to ask Patriarch for the Cloudwater map. As he spoke, he began to activate the Cloudwater Illusory Dream Art. Chapter 87, Treasure Obtained. Seeing the treasure within reach but obstructed by unexpected complications infuriated Bai Li Chen. He looked at Li Fan and couldn't help but shout angrily, where did this impostor come from? The disciples of the Cloudwater Heavenly Palace have long been exterminated. Mid-sentence, Bai Li Chen realized the inappropriateness of his words and stopped abruptly. Divine Ancestor, this person definitely cannot be an authentic disciple. He gritted his teeth and said to the turtle snake creature. However, the turtle snake creature paid no attention to his words, carefully discerning the aura operating within Li Fan. Cloudwater Illusory Dream Art. It's unexpected that Junior Qin also has a successor. Good, good. Seeming highly excited, the massive form of the turtle snake creature trembled slightly, and its ferocious visage relaxed a bit. Indeed, my cultivation technique is the direct transmission from senior brother Qin. Naturally, I can be considered a disciple of the Cloudwater Heavenly Palace, Li Fan nodded and said with an unchanged expression. They hadn't expected that what Li Fan said was actually true, causing Bai Li Chen's expression to darken instantly. Both he and Sikong Yi stared fixedly at Li Fan, their eyes brimming with murderous intent. Feeling the rapidly swelling killing intent emanating from them, Li Fan merely smiled slightly in response. You are both direct disciples, and this young man is also a direct disciple. You both want this Cloudwater map. It's truly a headache. The turtle snake creature seemed a bit confused, its gaze shifting back and forth between Li Fan and Bai Li Chen. After a while, its slow-thinking mind finally came up with a solution. Since that's the case, according to the rules of the sect, why don't you two compete against each other? Whoever wins, I will give this Cloudwater map to them. The turtle snake creature seemed quite satisfied with its own solution. It shook its body and moved its stiff body. Several broken swords fell from its body, drifting towards the edge of the sword forest below in a very unusual trajectory, increasing the size of the sword forest. Cloudwater Heavenly Palace disciples should respect and love each other. The two of you, be careful not to go too far during your sparring. The turtle snake creature cautioned in its old, hoarse voice. Then, numerous broken swords flew out from its body. They fell into the ground around Li Fan and Sikong Yi, leaving only a blank area in the middle, forming a natural arena. You may begin, the turtle snake creature said in a muffled voice. Li Fan chuckled, Divine Ancestor, rest assured, I will definitely spare Bai Li Chen's life. Bai Li Chen remained silent, his murderous intent reaching its peak. Above his head, 21 constantly rotating blue water swords suddenly appeared. Forming a sword formation, they whizzed towards Li Fan. But Li Fan simply extended his right hand and lightly grabbed towards Bai Li Chen. Everything became still. Even if there were 1,000 other means, they could no longer be executed at this moment. As if caught in an invisible giant net, Bai Li Chen was firmly trapped, suspended in midair, unable to move. The 24 water swords also dissipated midway in their flight. Patriarch Tai, who had been asleep for thousands of years, was now enthusiastically commentating. However, his thought process seemed rusty, making his commentary always a beat slow. Bai Li Chen had already been subdued by Li Fan before his voice slowly came out. Not bad. It's the sea-fixing sword technique. It's already practiced 21 swords, it's close to the grand completion. Surprising, this is the binding technique of that little insect child. I never thought it would be passed on to an outsider. Through the commentary of the turtle snake creature, Bai Li Chen and Sikong Yi had expressions of unimaginable horror. They naturally understood what technique had so effortlessly restrained Bai Li Chen. It was exactly the same as the method the strange cultivator used in the demon refining tower. To escape from that peculiar cultivator was one thing, but to learn his supernatural abilities. How was that achieved? Could it be that this person was truly a disciple of the Cloudwater Heavenly Palace? Otherwise, none of this could be explained. However, the disciples of the Cloudwater Heavenly Palace had clearly died out in the great calamity thousands of years ago. Who was he, really? Endless doubts and fears surged within Bai Li Chen and Sikong Yi. No, this person was too mysterious. If they fell into his hands. Looking at Li Fan's friendly face, the two couldn't help but shiver. Escape. So, under the gaze of the turtle snake creature and Li Fan, a strange scene unfolded. Bai Li Chen, who was bound by the insect, suddenly transformed and in the blink of an eye became Sikong Yi. Meanwhile, Sikong Yi, who was watching from the side, now appeared as Bai Li Chen. It wasn't just an exchange of appearance. Their auras, cultivation bases, and even the lock-on from Li Fan through the formless killing intent, all exchanged in an instant. Li Fan's expression changed, but he heard Bai Li Chen shout, "My skills are inferior to you, I admit defeat. I'll let senior brother have the Cloudwater map. Please, Divine Ancestor Tai, escort me out of the Cloudwater Heavenly Palace." What is this? The turtle snake creature was curious about the scene unfolding before its eyes, but was interrupted by Bai Li Chen's shout. You want to leave here? Yes, leaving is good. Leaving is good. In the turtle snake creature's lament, a blue light shrouded Bai Li Chen. His figure twisted for a moment, and he glared hatefully at Li Fan, then disappeared without a trace. As for Sikong Yi, who was bound by Li Fan, he instantly lost vitality. Under Li Fan's gaze, he slowly turned into ashes. Just like what happened in the demon refining tower a while ago. In Li Fan's senses, outside the Cloudwater Heavenly Palace, Sikong Yi once again appeared next to Bai Li Chen. The two were doing their utmost to escape from this place. You want to escape? Not so easy. Under the lock-on of the formless killing intent, unless they were too far away, no matter what they did, they couldn't escape from Li Fan's grasp. Not in a hurry to chase them, Li Fan instead inquired the turtle snake creature before him. Divine Ancestor Tai, I wonder which technique Bai Li Chen cultivated. To transform between different living beings is indeed quite amazing. It looks somewhat familiar, seems like I heard of it somewhere. After a while, he lamented, I'm getting old, my memory isn't so good. I can't recall. Well, while I still remember, I'll give you the Cloudwater map. The black snake entwined around Patriarch Tai's head opened its mouth. A miniaturized version of the Cloudwater Heavenly Palace, emitting colorful light, slowly flew to Li Fan. Li Fan held it in his hand, sensing the information appearing in his mind, he couldn't help but be somewhat astonished. Just this. Is this really worth 100,000 contribution points? This Cloudwater map was indeed what it seemed like, just a miniature model of the Cloudwater Heavenly Palace. Every detail was faithfully reproduced, including all the sizes and structures within the Cloudwater Heavenly Palace. Moreover, within it preserved a trace of spiritual consciousness left behind by the disciples of the Cloudwater Heavenly Palace from that era. Fixed in a special way, they became miniaturized figures, moving about in this miniature Cloudwater Heavenly Palace. Chapter 88. Executing Sikong Yi. Li Fan's divine sense wandered through this colorful model, making it feel as if he were personally touring the ancient Cloudwater Heavenly Palace. But, apart from this, it seemed like the Cloudwater map had no other special purpose. This Cloudwater map, perhaps it would be more fitting to call it the Cloudwater model. Or perhaps, does it hide some other secrets inside? Otherwise, why would someone offer a reward of 100,000 contribution points? Li Fan suddenly had many doubts. However, this wasn't the time to delve deeply into them. He stored the colorful model in his storage ring and then politely bowed to the turtle snake creature. Divine Ancestor Tai, please escort me out of here. I still have to find my junior brother Bai Li Chen. After a moment, Tai's aged voice sounded, yes, leaving is good. Leaving is good. It was the same reaction as when he sent Bai Li Chen away earlier. A blue light enveloped Li Fan, and then his figure disappeared. In front of Tai's palace, silence reigned once again for a long time. After some unknown duration, a strange noise shattered the tranquility. Z's, z's, z's. It was like the sound of a sword constantly grinding against a whetstone, and also like a giant serpent shedding its old skin. Each time this sound occurred, countless sword shadows appeared from the void and impaled the turtle snake creature. Boom! The Tai hall suddenly sank, and the turtle snake creature's limbs were forcibly retracted. The two black serpents on its head and tail let out painful howls as they writhed and returned to the Tai hall. Pain, pain! Tai's aged and mad voice thundered across the entire Cloudwater Heavenly Palace. Buildings shrouded in white mist seemed to respond with various horrifying sounds, continuously echoing. The virtual sword shadows intensified like a torrential rain. Roar! Finally, the figure of the turtle snake creature vanished. Only an empty Tai hall remained, along with the increasingly vast sword forest, silently witnessing Tai's eternal suffering. In the Kong Yun Sea, Li Fan's vision blurred, and he felt like he had returned to the azure ocean. However, he had already left the central area of the Cloudwater Heavenly Palace ruins. Sensing the positions of Sikong Yi and Bai Li Chen, Li Fan activated the stalking shadow technique, following closely behind them. At the same time, the previously dormant formless killing intent was suddenly activated. Sikong Yi and Bai Li Chen immediately encountered resistance, causing their speed to greatly decrease. Meanwhile, Li Fan's speed continued to increase. The distance grew closer and closer, and in no time, their figures became faintly visible. What exactly are you? I've already given you the Cloudwater map, so why are you still hounding us? Sikong Yi's angry voice sounded. Li Fan didn't reply, only accelerating his speed. You're truly pushing it. Seeing the situation, Sikong Yi actually gave up on running and turned to confront Li Fan. Golden sword chi appeared one after another around him, winding like a dragon. With a point from Sikong Yi, under the activation of the sword chi, they surged towards Li Fan like a multitude of flying dragons. As for Bai Li Chen, he had somehow used a secret technique, and his speed suddenly increased several times, attempting to flee towards a distant island. Are you trying to use the same trick as before? Are you planning to use the island's teleportation array to return to 10,000 Immortals Island? Not a bad idea. It's a pity I was prepared for this. Li Fan watched them closely, his eyes shining with an inexplicable light. Ever since he had learned that Sikong Yi and Bai Li Chen often acted together from Zhao Shuyuan, Li Fan had specifically purchased some targeted magical tools in the heavenly profound realm to better deal with them. For example, a shield surrounded by flames appeared in front of him, blocking all of Sikong Yi's golden sword chi. Red Flame Shield, 350 contribution points. It had a natural restraining effect on Sikong Yi's golden attribute sword chi. Li Fan also took a black chain from his storage ring. One end of the chain was aimed at Sikong Yi, while the other end targeted Bai Li Chen. With a gentle toss, the black chain rapidly extended, reaching out like a bolt of lightning, binding Sikong and Bai Li Chen together. The chain suddenly tightened. Bai Li Chen, who was frantically trying to escape, was abruptly yanked back towards Sikong. Soul-locking chain. Li Fan had spent 958 contribution points to have a Foundation Establishment Artificer from the 10,000 Immortals Alliance specially create it. Once the two were connected by the chain, they couldn't move too far apart from each other. Finally, watching the two captives chained together, Li Fan took out a set of formations. The Blue Wood Purple Fire Formation. A total of 1,500 contribution points. It was incredibly powerful. Once activated, it could reduce the average Qi condensation stage cultivator to ashes within moments. Li Fan remained expressionless and activated the formation, enveloping Sikong and Bai Li Chen. From the moment Li Fan blocked Sikong golden sword Qi to when he trapped the two with the formation, it had all occurred in the blink of an eye. The two never had a chance to react, they had become sitting ducks and could no longer escape. Who exactly are you? Sikong saw that each of Li Fan's moves was highly targeted, making it clear that he had been planning this all along. Now he couldn't help but be baffled. Li Fan didn't reply. Instead, he used his insect binding technique to control Bai Li Chen. Ignoring Sikong curses, Li Fan activated the formation, burning Sikong. Ah! Amidst the cries of agony, Sikong turned into ashes. However, there was no peculiar phenomenon in the sky above. Following this, just as Li Fan had anticipated, the scene unfolded. A faint phantom slowly appeared beside Bai Li Chen. After the phantom wriggled for a while, it gradually took on a solid form. Sikong had been resurrected. Li Fan squinted his eyes and once again activated the formation. The wails continued. Sikong died once more. After this resurrection, his cultivation fell, from the late Qi condensation stage to the mid-Qi condensation stage. Li Fan seemed to understand something. Purple flames leapt, and Sikong faced another round of death. Sikong went from cursing to begging for mercy, and then to tearfully pleading in agony. But Li Fan was unmoved. Sikong was enigmatic and had extraordinary means of self-preservation. Stealing the Cloud Water map, worth 100,000 contribution points, from him had already made him a mortal enemy. Even if Li Fan couldn't force his secrets out of him, there was no way he would let him go. The Blue Wood Purple Fire Formation was activated repeatedly. Soon, Sikong cultivation had dropped to the early Qi condensation stage. Desperation showed on his face. He collapsed, begging Li Fan to spare him. In order to save his own life, he chose to reveal his secrets to Li Fan. Li Fan listened silently, his expression still. Finally, purple flames shimmered. After dying 3 times in a row, Sikong could no longer resurrect. As for Bai Li Chen, after Sikong's final death, he turned into dust and completely disappeared from this world. At the place where Sikong vanished, a black token hovered silently in the air. Li Fan picked up the token, and a piece of information immediately appeared in his mind. The bearer of this token shall rule the Sun-Stealing Sect. Chapter 89, The Sun-Stealing Sect. The fall of a Qi condensation stage cultivator, compared to a Foundation Establishment stage cultivator, was much less spectacular. There were no magnificent displays of the foundational treasure, only 2 streaks of crimson clouds that suddenly appeared in the sky. Qi condensation stage cultivator, Sikong, cultivated for 35 years, slain by Qi condensation stage cultivator Li Fan in the Kongyunsi region. Qi condensation stage cultivator Bai Li Chen, cultivated for 3 years, slain by Qi condensation stage cultivator Li Fan in the Kongyunsi region. Now they have perished, returning to the heavens. Under the fiery clouds, Li Fan stood quietly, fiddling with the sun-stealing token in his hand. After a long while, he suppressed the greed rising within him. A remarkable treasure, but it's not for me. The sun-stealing token was the supreme treasure of the sun-stealing sect. The sun-stealing sect was a secretive sect that had existed since ancient times. Unlike other sects that founded schools and accepted many disciples, the sun-stealing sect had no fixed base and often had only 1 disciple per generation. As a result, when the Great Calamity befell the world, other sects experienced a bloodbath, but it had little impact on the sun-stealing sect. The reason the sun-stealing sect survived for thousands of years with only 1 disciple in each generation, maintaining their heritage, was largely due to their unique cultivation technique. Sun-stealing technique. This technique allowed the creation of a special clone using one's blood and some specific materials. Unlike regular clone techniques, this clone possessed its unique appearance, aura, soul, cultivation level, and realm, as well as its own luck and fate. This clone could be treated as a completely separate person. Furthermore, when creating a clone, if bones from deceased cultivators or the blood of a living one were added, it could strip away some of the target's innate talents, luck, and more, grafting them onto the clone. However, this alone did not demonstrate the full power of the sun-stealing sect. The sun-stealing technique, when combined with the sun-stealing token in Li Fan's hand, was the complete form. This sun-stealing token had been forged by Sikong Yu, the 38th generation disciple of the sun-stealing sect, thousands of years ago. She had witnessed the Great Calamity, where countless cultivators slaughtered each other like ants. Frightened, she deeply desired to find a perfect method of self-preservation. After more than 100 years of painstaking research and exploration, she finally created this sun-stealing token. Its uses were endless. It had an extensive storage space. After a sacrifice ceremony, the token could freely transfer between the master and the clone, ignoring spatial limitations. Most importantly, using the sun-stealing technique, she transferred the life essence of her clone and even her true self onto this token. As long as the token remained intact, even if the master and the clone were killed, they could reconstruct a new body by consuming the blood stored in the token, effectively resurrecting. In simple terms, after the completion of the cultivation technique, what was seen by outsiders, whether it was the master or the clone, was just an empty shell. The sun-stealing token was the true essence. After being modified by Sikong Yu in an unconventional way, the technique had become somewhat unorthodox, but it was effective. Over thousands of years, with the help of this bizarre technique, sun-stealing sect disciples had always managed to escape any perilous situation. Thus, the sun-stealing sect had survived for thousands of years without being extinguished, until Sikong Yi encountered an extraordinary anomaly like Li Fan who was capable of warping time and space. The sun-stealing technique was far from perfect and had some fatal drawbacks. For instance, there needed to be a certain distance between the primary body and the clone. The farther the clone was from the primary body, the more its power diminished. If the distance exceeded the limit, the clone's cultivation would drop to the minimum, typically at the early chi condensation stage. Another example was that due to their life essence being connected to the token, when a sun-stealing sect disciple died, a portion of their lingering soul would be bound within the token, unable to escape. These lingering souls often preserved some crucial memories from their previous lives. In times of crisis, these memories could be unleashed against enemies by the token's master. Li Fan's divine sense entered the sun-stealing token, and although the storage space was vast, it was empty except for Sikong Yi and another indistinct soul drifting within. His divine sense transformed into a giant hand, seizing these two lingering souls and delving into their remaining memories. After a long time, Li Fan finally understood why the millennia-old sun-stealing sect had fallen into such a desperate state. The origins of the situation stemmed from Sikong Yi's master, Sikong Bo. Over the centuries, the sun-stealing sect had traversed numerous dangerous situations without harm, which had made them increasingly arrogant. However, Sikong Bo had taken this audacity to an extreme. On a distant continent, when Sikong Bo, who had broken through to the foundation establishment stage, was dissatisfied with a clone he had previously refined, he decided to gather materials for a new one. During this time, he encountered a child of 5 or 6 in a remote mountain village. This child had a natural affinity for cultivation. Not only was their strength boundless, but their cultivation speed was astonishing. At such a young age, they had perfected chi condensation and were ready to advance to the foundation establishment stage. This piqued Sikong Bo's interest. After discreetly observing the child for a while, he realized that the child's luck was extraordinary. Every time the child ventured into the deep mountains to hunt, they returned with various rare treasures from the earth and heavens. If he could strip away the child's luck, the clone he would create would undoubtedly be remarkable. Therefore, Sikong Bo attempted to steal the child's essence during the night when the child was asleep. However, this child had long been selected by a nascent soul stage powerhouse who was approaching the end of their lifespan. This senior had been searching for a host for their next incarnation. Ordinarily, the process of taking over another's body would somewhat damage the target's foundation. But the nascent soul stage cultivator, who had given up on advancing further, didn't want to jeopardize their chances for further progress by allowing this to happen. So, they chose an extreme method, turning themselves into a heavenly treasure, waiting for the child to reach the foundation establishment stage, and then perfectly merging with them. Yes, according to Sikong Bo's residual memories, humans could be refined into heavenly treasures. Or rather, a significant portion of the many heavenly treasures appearing in the world were transformed from fallen cultivators. After a cultivator's death, their Tao underwent a transformation over countless years in the natural world. Based on their characteristics, temperament, and the nature of the techniques they had practiced in life, they would gradually form various heavenly treasures that would reappear in the world. In life, they could not practice the same techniques as others, and after death, they still had a role to play. This was the world's way of showing its regard for cultivators. Chapter 90. Everything has a cause. Li Fan had seen quite a few heavenly treasures in the past. Besides the Kong Yun Seas, Kanghai Pearl, there was Ko Hong's gnarled dragon branch and Dao Xuanzi's rust sword Dao Zan. Now, it seemed that these were mostly formed by the deceased cultivators of the past. The gnarled dragon branch focused on absorbing and devouring, rust sword Dao Zan had a will that was unbending and could decelerate rusting. From them, one could vaguely see the shadow of the cultivators. Suddenly learning the secrets of heavenly treasures, Li Fan was somewhat shocked. But considering the grand scenes he had witnessed during the incineration of the sea, he quickly calmed down. In Li Fan's eyes, the conflict between the heavens and the cultivators had clearly escalated to an extreme. In the intensifying conflict, any bizarre occurrences were possible. Li Fan then continued to examine the memories of Sikong Bo. The nascent soul expert had already turned himself into a foundation treasure and possessed the child as his host. He mostly remained in slumber and only awakened when guiding the child in cultivation or when the child faced life-threatening situations. Thus, he didn't detect Sikong Bo's secret observation or malicious intentions. Only until that night when Sikong Bo tried to steal the child's essence blood did he wake up. The nascent soul expert immediately flew into a rage. The child was his hope to reach soul transformation or even Tao integration, and he would not tolerate anyone coveting the child. He revealed his true form on the spot, turning into a green willow tree, intending to kill Sikong Bo. One was a nascent soul cultivator transformed into a heavenly treasure, suffering a significant decrease in strength. The other, while only at the foundation establishment stage, possessed various methods due to a millennia-old esoteric sect inheritance. For a time, the two fought neck and neck. They used all their means, engaged in a true battle, and neither was willing to retreat. After a prolonged fight, both of them suffered heavy injuries and began to consider withdrawal. At this moment, the child suddenly appeared. With a cold expression, he looked at the two with indifference, utterly different from the innocent child from a few days earlier. He had already reached the limits of the Qi condensation stage. As long as there was a heavenly treasure, he could step into the foundation establishment stage at any time. The green willow sensed that something was wrong and wanted to escape, but it was too late. During his slumber, the child had secretly placed various restrictions on him. Now, these restrictions suddenly activated, and the green willow was instantly absorbed into the child. Seeing this scene, Sikong Bo was utterly horrified and fled without any regard for anything. The child, despite just entering the foundation establishment stage, displayed a martial master's demeanor. His every move struck the vital points of Sikong Bo. Moreover, it seemed that he knew a lot about Sikong Bo's background. Every time Sikong Bo tried to escape and separate from his split body, the child would immediately destroy it. Both of them chased each other until Sikong Bo's split body was completely destroyed. The main body was severely injured and cornered. In desperation, he chose to release all the remaining souls of his sect elders contained in the sun-stealing token to withstand for a moment. Those souls did indeed cause some interference for the child. Sikong Bo managed to get far away. However, he soon saw a purple thunderbolt descending from the sky, annihilating all the souls. Sikong Bo was utterly terrified and didn't look back, running madly. He continued to flee until he reached this remote Kong Yunsi area, where he finally stopped. However, his injuries were too severe, and his time was running out. Before his death, Sikong Bo found Sikong Yi and took him as his disciple. After hurriedly handing over the sun-stealing technique and the token to him, he perished. As for Sikong Yi's memories, compared to his master's thrilling adventures, they were much simpler. He received the sun-stealing sect's inheritance, but his benevolent master left almost nothing to him before his death. Cultivating as an unaffiliated cultivator was indeed tough. Even gathering the materials to create a clone was difficult. So, he explored on his own until he reached the Qi condensation stage, and he made the decisive choice to join the 10,000 Immortals Alliance. After breaking through to the middle stage of qi condensation, he began to collect materials and crafted his own clone. In a fortunate coincidence, he found a corpse while exploring the seabed. Sikong had a vague sense that this corpse was extraordinary, possibly belonging to a powerful cultivator in their previous life. Thus, he used this corpse as material to create his own clone, who was known as Bai Li Chen. When the clone was successfully crafted, fuzzy images appeared in his mind. It turned out that this corpse had once been a disciple of the ancient Cloudwater Heavenly Palace. When the Great Calamity arrived, he was seriously injured and fled from the Cloudwater Heavenly Palace but couldn't last long and eventually lost his life at sea. Thousands of years later, Sikong turned him into a clone. Through this clone, Sikong not only obtained a cultivation technique called the sea-fixing sword technique, but also learned some secrets about the Cloudwater Heavenly Palace from the past. Unfortunately, they were just fragments, and he couldn't gain a complete understanding. Besides, the Cloudwater Heavenly Palace had long been hidden by a grand formation and was not visible to the world. Sikong wanted to explore it, but it was impossible. Later, he found that the highly rewarded Cloudwater map was located within the Cloudwater Heavenly Palace. He was overjoyed, knowing that his opportunity had come. He kept a close eye on the changes in the central area of the Kongyun Sea, waiting for the Cloudwater Heavenly Palace to open. However, he didn't expect to encounter Li Fan. Sikong didn't even know until his death that he had been killed. How had his killer noticed him? He had learned from his master's lesson and acted very cautiously. Feeling the strong unwillingness in Sikong remaining soul, Li Fan maintained his calm expression. He summoned the Azure Flame illusionary spirit and completely obliterated the two remaining souls. If it weren't for me, Sikong would probably have successfully obtained the Cloudwater map, exchanged it for 100,000 contribution points, and then used the long-distance teleportation array to leave the Kongyun Sea before anyone else could react. No, something is wrong. Thinking back to what had happened in his previous life, Li Fan shook his head inwardly. In my previous life, many people saw Sikong leaving alone through the teleportation array. However, no one noticed Bai Li Chen. Perhaps, this should be Sikong mirroring of a golden cicada shedding its shell. In the end, he probably never left the Kongyun Sea. There's no need to deceive the Tianquan mirror. Just disappearing from the sight of those who covet the 100,000 contribution points will be enough. A good method. Perhaps I can do it this time. After all, the temptation of 100,000 contribution points is simply too great. Li Fan put away the sun-stealing token and flew towards a nearby island. He wanted to pay a visit to the 10,000 Immortals Island. This trip to the Cloudwater Heavenly Palace had yielded an immense harvest, even a bit overwhelming. He needed to spend some time digesting it. Chapter 91, Creating a Clone. After returning to the 10,000 Immortals Island via the teleportation array, Li Fan found out that the news about the reappearance of the Cloudwater Heavenly Palace in the mortal world had already spread. Quick look. Mysterious sect revives after thousands of years. Gentle senior brother attempts misdeeds at night. Top secret information, only 10 contribution points, no deception. At first, it was the information sold by Zhao Shuyuan, related only to the first trial of the Qin Hall. However, since it was first-hand information, it still fetched a high price of 30 contribution points per copy. Zhao Shuyuan made a considerable profit from this. However, as survivors returned from the Cloudwater Heavenly Palace, information about this mysterious sect's remnants gradually became richer, and the prices fell accordingly. Of course, the information available on the market was currently limited to the information about the Qin Tang statue and several other anomalies around it. There was still a lack of information about the deeper areas of the Cloudwater Heavenly Palace, such as the Demon Refining Tower and the Tai Hall. Li Fan shook his head and returned to the Tianquan mirror to assess his gains from this journey. The Cloudwater Illusory Dream Art, taught by Qin Tang, the Insect Binding Technique, from the Ji Taoist, and the Cloudwater Map. There was also the Sea-Fixing Sword Technique, and the Sun-Stealing Technique, received from Sikong, as well as the Sun-Stealing Token. Li Fan had already cultivated the Jade Cosmos Thousand Variations Sutra, the Netherworld Spirit Illusion Technique, and the Stalking Shadow Technique. With his multiple techniques, he needed to make choices about which technique to specialize in. The Insect Binding Technique was an innate technique, so it didn't require cultivation. The Cloudwater Illusory Dream Art had endless uses. It was incredibly valuable for Li Fan's future plans, so he had to cultivate it. The sun-stealing technique could be cultivated, but Li Fan's divine sense swept across the sun-stealing token inside his storage ring. The method for creating a clone might be worth a try. As for the technique that Sikong Yu had developed later, which transformed one's essence into the sun-stealing token, it didn't need to be cultivated. In Li Fan's eyes, this self-preservation method was far from perfect. As long as he could trap the main body and the clone, followed by continuous extermination, the so-called resurrection was just a joke. In this world, for self-preservation, what could be stronger than his truth? Why chase after trivial gains and ignore the big picture? Moreover, as he looked at the somewhat eerie, lifelike token, Li Fan had a faint premonition. Sun-stealing. Who replaces whom? It's hard to say. There's no need to risk it. Let's put it aside for now, and verify it at a later date. Sea-fixing sword technique can be cultivated all the way to the golden core realm. When perfected, you can condense 108 sea-fixing swords in your dantian. It's a first-class martial technique for killing, with considerable power, but there's no need to hurry with cultivation. Now, it's been 12 years. In my previous life, the crimson flames burning of the sea took place in the 31st year. At that time, I was still hesitant about whether to participate in this major event. Now, with this opportunity, if I use my clone with the cloud water illusory dream art, even if my main body escapes to a distant continent, I can still stir up some commotion in the Kongyun Sea. In an instant, Li Fan's mind was flooded with various schemes. After a long time, he decided to put them aside for now. He took out a small, colorful model from his storage ring and examined it carefully. If I hadn't acquired this item directly from Patriarch Tai himself, I'm afraid I wouldn't believe that this is the legendary Cloudwater map. After studying it, I still can't see any mysteries, Li Fan couldn't help but exclaim. Perhaps there really is a secret hidden inside this. But if I can't crack it, it's just like trash sitting in my hands. It's more appropriate to exchange it for 100,000 contribution points. But if I submit it right now, it will attract too much attention. I should create a clone first. Li Fan checked his current contribution points. Previously, to deal with Sikong Yi, he had nearly spent all of his contribution points. He was left with just over 500 points. Thankfully, the materials needed for creating a clone were mostly not too expensive. Superior bones, heavenly spirit milk, shattered bone essence. Li Fan purchased these materials one by one. Finally, when he had only 135 points left, Li Fan bought all the other materials except for the last one, Heaven Crystal Spirit Sand. As for the Heaven Crystal Spirit Sand, Sikong Yi's memories indicated that it could be collected in some places within the Kongyun Sea. Afterward, Li Fan activated the auxiliary cultivation mode and began cultivating the sun-stealing technique. The sun-stealing technique was somewhat similar to the Jade Cosmos Thousand Variations Sutra that Li Fan primarily cultivated. The Jade Cosmos Thousand Variations Sutra involved cultivating Qi, while the sun-stealing technique focused on stealing destiny. Both Qi and destiny were profound and challenging to sense, yet they existed as truths. With the boost from the enlightenment mode, Li Fan spent 3 days to cultivate it to the middle, Qi condensation stage. However, his contribution points were now down to a meager 35 points. In any case, the sun-stealing technique allowed him to create a clone at the middle Qi condensation stage, so he decided to halt his cultivation. Bringing the materials with him, Li Fan left the 10,000 Immortals Island through the teleportation array and arrived in the western Kongyun Sea, specifically on Lingyun Island. The location where the Heaven Crystal Spirit Sand could be found wasn't far from Lingyun Island. He greeted the guardian of Lingyun Island, activated a concealing form talisman, and flew toward the location. After several days, he stopped in an area of the sea filled with whirlpools of various sizes and then dove beneath the sea. The seawater here was relatively shallow, only about 300 to 400 meters deep, and he soon reached the seabed. The seabed was littered with collapsed architectural remnants, indicating that it was the site of some ancient ruins. The scale of the ruins was quite large, and it was still possible to imagine its former prosperity. However, it had sunk to the bottom of the sea for some unknown reason. Such ruins were scattered throughout the Kongyun Sea, and Li Fan didn't find them unusual. After all, when Li Fan had just arrived in the Kongyun Sea, he had heard about the great windstorm disaster that had struck and caused hundreds of islands to sink. Arriving next to an oblique stone column, Li Fan slipped through the gaps in the stone. Inside, it appeared as though a pitch-black cave, with hundreds of luminescent jellyfish drifting about. They looked like moving stars. The cave's floor was covered with a layer of shimmering sand. In the center of the cave, a giant rock had been hollowed out, serving as the jellyfish's habitat. The glowing sand on the floor was naturally the Heaven Crystal Spirit Sand. Li Fan collected the Heaven Crystal Spirit Sand from the ground and then gazed at the giant rock in the center, marveling at the wonder of creation. This place was also discovered by Sikong Yi by chance. The central boulder was originally an ordinary heavenly spirit ore. But after being consumed and digested by these unknown jellyfish, it had transformed into a precious material, the Heaven Crystal Spirit Sand. It was truly incredible. To put it in perspective, even a foundation establishment alchemist would have to spend quite a bit of time to refine Heaven Crystal Spirit Sand. Chapter 92, Li Fan and Fan Lin. After obtaining the Heaven Crystal Spirit Sand, Li Fan left the cave and returned to the sea surface. With all the necessary materials collected, he was now ready to start creating his clone. However, this was something he couldn't do under the watchful eyes of the 10,000 Immortals Alliance. Li Fan thought for a moment and continued flying westward. On a deserted island in that direction, there was a subworld that Sikong Yi had once opened. He had concealed it using the techniques of the sun-stealing sect, making it difficult for ordinary cultivators to detect. This was where Sikong Yi had created his own clone. So, Li Fan decided to head for that subworld. After flying for another 2 days, he was nearing the deserted island. However, he faintly sensed that someone was present on the island. He immediately became alert, concealed his presence, and stealthily approached. Strange, it should be on this island. A somewhat familiar voice echoed from a distance. Li Fan focused his vision and saw a figure that looked furtive. It was none other than Zhao Shuyuan. He was scratching his head with his left hand while holding a square-shaped object in his right hand. The object resembled a compass, but it had more intricate patterns and symbols on it. A red light emitted from it and spread into the surroundings, soon returning with a beep sound. It's impossible, I should be in the right place. But why isn't this spirit discernment disc working? Zhao Shuyuan seemed puzzled. What are you looking for? Just then, Li Fan's voice abruptly sounded. Zhao Shuyuan was startled, and the spirit discernment plate almost slipped from his hand. Is that you, Senior Sikong? He turned around and looked at the figure that had suddenly appeared, concealed by a concealing form talisman, making it impossible to discern his appearance. He asked tentatively. Did you send someone to secretly follow us before to sneak into my subworld while I was away? Li Fan asked coldly, his tone unfriendly. Zhao Shuyuan chuckled, misunderstanding, it's all a misunderstanding. His eyes darted around, and he quickly asked, I wonder where Senior Bailey is. Li Fan didn't reply. Instead, he took out the blue wood-purple fire formation and enveloped Zhao Shuyuan. The purple flames flashed, and amid Zhao Shuyuan's miserable screams, he turned into ash. The air carried a scent akin to charred wood. As expected, just a puppet. Li Fan wasn't surprised. He looked at the deserted island below and activated the sun-stealing technique. He faintly sensed the existence of a hidden subworld in the island's jungle. He flew toward it and stopped in front of a seemingly ordinary coconut tree. Gently touching it, he felt a gravitational force. Releasing his resistance, he was drawn into the tree. The so-called subworld was actually quite simple. It could barely accommodate 2 people without feeling crowded. There was nothing valuable inside. But Li Fan was only borrowing this place temporarily and didn't care much about its furnishings. He also wasn't worried about retaliation from Zhao Shuyuan because sneaking into another person's subworld wasn't a noble act. Moreover, this place was quite remote. Even if Zhao Shuyuan wanted to seek revenge, by the time he traveled a long distance, Li Fan would have already created his clone and left. Li Fan didn't dwell on such matters. He took out the necessary materials, held his breath, and focused on the task at hand. This time, when creating the clone, Li Fan didn't intend to put too much effort into taking away the life force from other cultivators. In his plan, this clone was only meant to deceive others, draw attention away, and acquire the 100,000 contribution points he needed. He would also leave this clone behind to observe the events of the sea's incineration. Since, in the end, they would all face death, he didn't need to be overly meticulous about it. The creation process began. Li Fan used a drop of his own essence blood as the core and controlled the blood of various animals and beasts, condensing them into a humanoid form. Then, he activated his techniques and sensed the scattered life forces in the surrounding world. Most of these life forces belonged to the plants and animals on the nearby islands. Each one was weak, but there were a great number of them. Li Fan carefully extracted a strand of life force from each of these sources and converged them into one place. As he continued to extract life forces, it became increasingly challenging to control them. Li Fan knew that he couldn't be too greedy, otherwise, he might lose control, resulting in the life forces backfiring on him. Once he felt that he had reached the limit of what he could control, Li Fan stopped extracting more life force. Li Fan incorporated this new collection of extracted life force into the humanoid figure's flesh. Instantly, a faint sign of vitality emerged from it. The process of creating the clone was already more than halfway complete, and Li Fan added the remaining materials one by one. Bones, organs, skin, and hair slowly took shape. Li Fan then adjusted the appearance of the clone. He didn't make it exceptionally handsome or ugly but gave it an average, forgettable face that would blend into a crowd. After a while, an expressionless face appeared before him. Li Fan observed it carefully and nodded in satisfaction. Now, there was just one final step. Li Fan concentrated his thoughts and pointed at the clone's head. Sever. He severed the connection between the clone's life force and its origins. Finally, the clone became a separate entity. Li Fan and the clone looked at each other. An extra body and a whole new perspective. It felt somewhat peculiar. Controlling the clone, making it move, sit, stand, it took a while for Li Fan to adapt. He retrieved clothes from his storage ring and dressed the clone. He bowed to the original. Greetings, fellow Taoist. The original Li Fan smiled. From now on, you shall be called Fan Lin. Very well. Fan Lin, the clone, had a slightly lower cultivation level than the original. He was only at the qi condensation intermediate stage and hadn't cultivated any techniques. He was a blank slate. Now that the clone had been successfully created, the next step was to integrate him into the 10,000 Immortals Alliance. There was no need for the original Li Fan to introduce him. Fan Lin carried the storage ring containing the cloud water map, and flew to the vicinity of Lingyun Island. The original Li Fan followed quietly, prepared for any unforeseen circumstances. Thankfully, nothing unexpected occurred. Fan Lin successfully met with the guardian of Lingyun Island and requested to join the 10,000 Immortals Alliance. His request was readily accepted. After completing the familiar procedures, Fan Lin arrived on 10,000 Immortals Island and entered his own Tianquan mirror space. The original Li Fan also returned to 10,000 Immortals Island, but they didn't meet in person. Fan Lin then took out the cloud water map, and chose to complete the mission worth 100,000 contribution points. At the same time, the original Li Fan concentrated his mental power and sensed the situation on Fan Lin's side. The Tianquan mirror remained silent for a much longer time than usual. For a while, there was no response. Li Fan thought something might have gone wrong. Finally, the Tianquan mirror's voice spoke again. Unable to verify the authenticity of the cloud water map. Please wait. The mission issuer requests to visit your space. Do you accept? Fan Lin was taken aback, then chose to accept. A moment later, a white-haired old man with a benevolent expression appeared before Fan Lin. There was no trace of a cultivator's aura about him. He appeared just like an ordinary mortal. Chapter 93, The Heavenly Doctora S. Immortal Sutra. The elderly man with white hair seemed somewhat familiar, yet Fan Lin couldn't recall where he had seen him before. He appeared gentle and friendly, just like a kindly grandfather, radiating a positive impression. Of course, Fan Lin didn't believe that this person was an ordinary mortal. It was undoubtedly his cultivation level that was beyond what Fan Lin could perceive at the moment. So Fan Lin became even more cautious. He paid his respects. Greetings, senior. The white-haired man responded with a warm smile. No need to be so formal, I'm just an old man who hasn't died yet. After a pause, he asked kindly, you want to hand over the cloud water map? Li Fan nodded and then handed over the model. The white-haired man accepted the miniature cloud water heavenly palace, carefully examining it. His eyes filled with boundless nostalgia. That's right, this is it. Han Hai, Tai, Fu Yun. It's been a long time. Seemingly lost in memories, the old man's gaze became somewhat cloudy. Hearing the words of the old man, Fan Lin's heart skipped a beat. He stood quietly to the side, not daring to move. From the old man's words, it seemed that he was of the same generation as that turtle snake Tai. The destruction of the Cloudwater Heavenly Palace happened many years ago. How could this guy have survived all this time? After all, following the Great Calamity, Cultivators were generally targeted by the malicious will of the heavens and the earth, and they couldn't live as long as the ancient cultivators. Living for 1,000 years was already very difficult. What kind of cultivation level was needed to live this long? Soul transformation, Tao integration. Fan Lin didn't dare to speculate but became even more cautious. In a world where different schools of cultivation couldn't coexist, someone who had managed to survive from the time of the Great Calamity until now was a big shot. If anyone thought they'd be as kind as they appeared, they were being too naive. The white-haired man, seeing Fan Lin somewhat nervous, chuckled. "How is the scene in the Cloudwater Heavenly Palace today?" he asked. Fan Lin then gave a detailed description of the situation, mentioning how Qin Tang had turned into a statue, the Jiyu Taoist who refined elixirs using his own body, and Tai, whose body was stabbed with broken swords. "If it weren't for some special circumstances preventing me from entering the Cloudwater Heavenly Palace, I wouldn't idly sit by watching them suffer." After a long silence, the old man sighed deeply. "To be able to come out of the Cloudwater Heavenly Palace alive, you are indeed quite resourceful," he praised Fan Lin after sizing him up. "It's just a matter of luck," Fan Lin modestly replied. "I have a request, would you be willing to accept it?" The white-haired man suddenly asked. "Senior, please speak. I need you to pay a visit to the Cloudwater Heavenly Palace for me. Place this object there." The white-haired man took out a small white jade figurine and handed it to Fan Lin. The figurine didn't seem to have any special aura, it appeared to be made of ordinary white jade. The figurine's appearance was identical to the old man standing before Fan Lin. "Since I can't personally enter the Cloudwater Heavenly Palace, I will use this figurine to accompany them continuously. As for the reward..." After contemplating for a moment, the white-haired man pointed at Fan Lin's forehead. Suddenly, Fan Lin's mind was flooded with countless pieces of information. Even with his chi condensation intermediate stage level of mental power, he couldn't help but feel dizzy, and his head began to throb. When he regained his senses, the image of the white-haired man had already disappeared from the Tianquan mirror, and he had received 100,000 contribution points. Slowly, Fan Lin organized the vast amount of information in his mind. After a long while, he finally understood the reward from the white-haired man. It was the Heavenly Doctor's Immortal Sutra. It wasn't a cultivation technique but instead a medical treatise. It encompassed knowledge about human physiology, pathology, diagnosis, treatment, and various aspects of medicine. The scope of the treatise even extended to all kinds of animals and plants in the world, making it incredibly comprehensive. The volume of information contained within was massive. Fan Lin estimated that just a single read-through would take at least a dozen years. This vast and invaluable repository of knowledge had been casually given to Fan Lin by the white-haired man. This is indeed a blessing, but unfortunately, learning it is too mentally exhausting. I can only put it aside for now and slowly digest it later. Fan Lin couldn't afford to neglect the request from the white-haired man, especially when he had already received the reward in advance. So, Fan Lin visited the Cloudwater Heavenly Palace once again. He had expected that, upon entering the Cloudwater Heavenly Palace, his clone would relive Qin Tang's dream-like test. However, after the figurine emitted a burst of white light from his storage ring, Fan Lin found himself standing right in front of the Cloudwater Heavenly Palace's gate. The figurine left his storage ring and flew into the sky, slowly dissolving like ice melting. As the task considered completed like this, "It seems too simple and smooth," Fan Lin mumbled to himself. After waiting for a while, nothing unusual happened within the Cloudwater Heavenly Palace. "I wonder what this figurine is for." Fan Lin couldn't discern any mysteries in it, so he decided to leave. Safely back inside the Tianquan mirror, Fan Lin stared at his balance of 100,000 contribution points, lost in thought. Originally, Fan Lin had planned to have his clone acquire the necessary cultivation techniques and treasures and then give them to his main body, much like the way Xiaoheng had exchanged the minor yan water technique in his previous life. However, after encountering the white-haired man, Fan Lin dispelled this idea. At present, it seemed best to avoid any connection between the clone and the main body. This white-haired man gave Fan Lin a strong sense of danger. As the clone had already fallen under his gaze, if the main body and the clone had direct contact, there was a risk that the connection between them would be discovered. Even with the mystical sun-stealing technique, in this dangerous world of cultivation, people could be refined into heavenly treasures. So, no matter how cautious he was, it wasn't excessive. As for whether these 100,000 contribution points would go to waste in the hands of the clone and couldn't be spent, there was no need to worry about that. After all, the most valuable thing in this world was various types of knowledge, including cultivation techniques. While the clone browsed through various knowledge, the main body would be also learning. So, these 100,000 contribution points would be effectively spent by the clone in the same way they would be spent by the main body. With a focused mind, Fan Lin started by searching for information about the ancient war. During his time in the Cloudwater Heavenly Palace, he was greatly interested in the constant references made by Qin Tang and the Jiyu Taoist cultivator about a war that appeared to be quite tragic, causing them to remember it even after becoming anomalies. Quickly, Fan Lin found some fragmentary information. Unfortunately, all the related records were vague and incomplete, with the rest being lost to history. What could be confirmed was that there was indeed such a great war. This war seemed to have lasted for a long time, starting even before the immortal ancestors' preaching. It had continued until the arrival of the Great Calamity. Fan Lin next searched for information about heavenly treasures. Chapter 94. Zhang Haoboa's Rebirth. Treatise on Heavenly Treasures. Cost: 2,000 contribution points. Without even blinking, Fan Lin made the purchase. He carefully began to peruse the contents. Heavenly treasures were key to a cultivator's foundation. They could be categorized into three main types: celestial treasures, earthly treasures, and human treasures. Celestial treasures were mysterious and elusive, closely aligned with the heavens, and were rarely encountered. The book only gave one example: the foundation of the 10,000 Immortals Alliance. Yanfa Ju 1. The specific owner of this foundation treasure remained unknown. Its special effect allowed the spontaneous generation of new techniques day and night. When Fan Lin read this, he stopped and thought, previously, I heard from Ko Hong that the cultivation techniques that cultivators use nowadays were all newly created techniques. I assumed that there must be some genius who was capable of inventing so many diverse techniques. But it's not a result of human innovation, it's reliant on this heavenly treasure. Fan Lin pondered this revelation and continued reading. Earthly treasures were rare as well, but they were less elusive than celestial treasures. They often appeared alongside extraordinary natural phenomena. The book gave some examples. The disappearance of the Kangwu province's 4 rivers and 28 mountains left behind a seemingly bottomless abyss and led to the creation of the Kangwu landscape map earthly treasure. The continent's water system, which originally flowed from west to east into the sea, suddenly reversed one year, with all waters converging at Penglai Mountain, which persisted for 3 months, leading to the emergence of the World Water Mother. Fan Lin found this information engrossing and thought, does that mean the Kanghai Pearl is also an earthly wonder? It was still more than a decade before the emergence of the Kanghai Pearl, and it appeared to be near Flowing Cloud Island. He couldn't afford to forget about this matter. Next, there was the category of human treasures. The majority of heavenly treasures in the world belong to this category. They often formed over several thousand years from the remains of fallen cultivators and could be classified into 3 grades based on their quality: upper, middle, and lower grades. The higher the quality, the more powerful a cultivator could become by using them. Fan Lin couldn't help but think of the gnarled dragon branch and the rust sword Dao Zan. He wondered what grade these 2 wonders were. Based on their displayed power, they were at least of medium grade. As Fan Lin's clone delved deep into the secrets of the cultivation world, the main body, Li Fan, was quietly traversing the teleportation array to reach Luli Island. He didn't encounter He Zhenghao but instead met a stranger guarding the island's large formation. He suspected that He Zhenghao was still exploring the cave and hadn't returned yet. Fan Lin didn't think too much about it and merely nodded to the guardian. He then exited the formation, concealed his presence, and silently arrived at Captain Zhang Haobo's home. Seeing Zhang Haobo fast asleep, Fan Lin smiled faintly. 19 years remained until the burning of the sea. With the clone now complete, some preparations could be made in advance. Fan Lin activated the Cloudwater Illusory Dream Art. Zhang Haobo abruptly awoke from a terrifying nightmare, drenched in cold sweat. He was panting heavily, and the fear in his heart had yet to subside. After a while, he finally regained his senses, gazing around at the unfamiliar surroundings. Where was he? Luli Island. Could it be that everything was just a terrible nightmare? But when had he ever had such vivid dreams? In the dream, he had once gone fishing at sea and pulled up a corpse, along with a book. Even after being submerged in seawater for a long time, the text on the pages remained clear. Sea Fixing Sword Technique. It was a cultivation secret technique from the ancient Cloud Water Heavenly Palace, capable of carrying practitioners through to the foundation establishment stage. With it, 24 sea-fixing swords could be condensed in the dantian, making it exceptionally powerful. With this secret technique, he had made significant progress in just over a decade. All the way from an ordinary person to reaching the late chi condensation stage. Originally, he had hoped to build his foundation, but he hadn't expected. Whenever Zhang Haobo thought about the terrifying scenes in his dream, he couldn't help but shudder uncontrollably. In the sky above the Kongyun Sea, a sudden appearance emerged, a translucent figure of crimson. In its hand, there was a seemingly feeble flame. But it was this very flame that, in the subsequent 10 years, slowly evaporated the entire expanse of the Kongyun Sea. His relatives, his homeland, and everything around him were utterly obliterated by it. The cultivators of 10,000 Immortals Island fought desperately against it, but unfortunately, the power of that figure was overwhelming. Moreover, its appearance had been so sudden. The Kongyun Sea had turned into an impassable dead zone. Without reinforcements, eventually, the cultivators on 10,000 Immortals Island fought with all their might, only managing to severely injure it. Rolling flames descended from the sky, turning 10,000 Immortals Island into ashes. The nightmare ended at this point, but Zhang Haobo couldn't calm down for a long time. Was it truly just a dream? How could he, an ordinary person, dream so vividly about 10,000 Immortals Island, the Tianquan Mirror, and other things that hadn't even existed in his imagination before? And even the cultivation techniques. Wait a minute. Zhang Haobo's eyes narrowed. The cultivation technique, sea-fixing sword technique, suddenly emerged in his mind. Every word, every sentence was crystal clear. He abruptly stood up. It wasn't a dream. Could it be rebirth? He had read quite a few novels in the past, which included plots of dying and returning to the past decades ago. But he never thought he would experience such a thing himself one day. It took Zhang Haobo a long time to calm down. He made an effort to recall his previous life's experiences. Unfortunately, perhaps because the terrifying crimson figure had overwhelmed his entire consciousness, he only had a vague impression of major events from his past life. However, it was enough. He turned to look at his sleeping wife. His gaze became firm. The tragedy would occur in a little over 10 years. If he prepared in advance and made arrangements, he could undoubtedly kill that crimson figure. First and foremost, he had to break through to the early chi condensation stage. Then, he would join the 10,000 Immortals Alliance. The matter of rebirth was too strange to be revealed to others. He also needed to find a way to make the 10,000 Immortals Alliance believe that the crimson figure would truly appear. Zhang Haobo recovered the mindset of the late-stage chi condensation cultivator from his previous life. His mind was constantly calculating. Li Fan watched as Zhang Haobo's expression continued to change and, seeing that he didn't immediately try to escape, he nodded in secret. Zhang Haobo's belief in his rebirth was naturally the result of Li Fan's cloud water illusory dream art. Using his real future experiences as a blueprint, Li Fan constructed an illusion to deceive an ordinary person, which was already more than sufficient. Unfortunately, Li Fan's current level of cultivation was still shallow, and even though he had experienced events from the future, he couldn't know everything. So, the illusion he created still had some flaws. In order to increase the credibility of the illusion, Li Fan even brought out the sea-fixing sword technique, which had been truncated to the foundation establishment stage. The purpose was to have Zhang Haobo, in his stead, drive the 10,000 Immortals Alliance to confront the Crimson Flame. Li Fan wanted to know how the various cultivators on 10,000 Immortals Island would react if they knew in advance about the arrival of the Heavenly Spirit. Of course, to prevent Zhang Haobo from being frightened by the Crimson Flame's power and choosing to escape immediately, Li Fan implanted some psychological suggestions into his mind, making him feel a sense of responsibility to prevent the tragedy from happening for the sake of his family and comrades. At the same time, he made modifications to the Crimson Flame's strength, making it appear less invincible and more susceptible to defeat. Now, it seemed like the effect was quite good. In the future, Li Fan planned to periodically return to strengthen the illusion using the cloud water illusory dream art. With these thoughts in mind, Li Fan employed formless killing intent to secretly lock onto Zhang Haobo to prevent him from slipping away unnoticed. ***********. 1 Yanfa Ju translates roughly to technique derivation Jade. Chapter 95. Life and Death Interlocking. The reason why Li Fan chose Zhang Haobo as the reborn, to provoke the 10,000 Immortals League to fight against Crimson Flame was, of course, because this person's fate was extraordinary. In the previous life, as a mortal, he could vaguely sense the crisis of the burning sea and fled far away before the disaster arrived. Not only that, it seemed that he had another fate on a distant continent. In just over 20 years, he transformed from a mortal into a Foundation establishment powerhouse. In this life, with the techniques provided by Li Fan, it was likely that he could grow even faster. Only in this way would he qualify to participate in the great event of resisting the Crimson Flames burning of the sea. The seed has been sown, and now one must wait for it to grow into a towering tree. Of course, during its growth, it would inevitably need some trimming and pruning. Li Fan looked at Zhang Haobo, who had experienced a drastic change of mind and then fallen into a deep sleep, took off into the air, and prepared to return to the island of 10,000 immortals. Under the cover of the night, most of the residents of Luli Island had already fallen into deep sleep, and the island was dark. Only one residence was still brightly lit, but the courtyard was hung with white mourning banners. Li Fan had been to that residence before. It was the home of Steward Zhao, the steward in charge of the island's finances. So Li Fan's spiritual sense scanned it briefly. His figure suddenly stopped and hung in midair, and a look of surprise flashed in Li Fan's eyes. He landed in the courtyard of Steward Zhao's residence and walked into the spiritual hall. Steward Zhao was dressed in mourning, kneeling in front of a memorial tablet. Li Fan looked at the characters on the memorial tablet, lost in thought. The memorial tablet of the late immortal master He Zhenghao. He Zhenghao, is he dead? Li Fan wasn't particularly shocked, just extremely puzzled. It is said that a person cannot truly witness the event twice. However, with the truth, Li Fan could witness the same event countless times. His slight movements might cause ripples in the river, but he couldn't change the river's course. He Zhenghao's death was unexpected. How did fellow Taoist he die? Li Fan couldn't help but ask. Steward Zhao was suddenly taken aback but immediately turned around and answered respectfully, "It is said that immortal master He encountered traps while exploring an ancient cave and tragically perished. It has been 56 days so far." Li Fan couldn't help but recall He Zhenghao's message from back then. Just now, several fellow Taoists of mine discovered an ancient cave and invited me to explore it with them. They say that this cave should have been sealed long before the Great Calamity, and it is bound to contain numerous treasures and perhaps even some techniques. He Zhenghao wanted Li Fan to oversee Luli Island because he wanted to explore this cave. Li Fan refused because he was trying to obtain the cloud water map. At that time, he hadn't taken this matter to heart, thinking that He Zhenghao would surely return safely. After all, in the previous life, Li Fan had encountered He Zhenghao more than 10 years later, and he was perfectly fine at that time. But unexpectedly, he had directly perished. So, in the previous life, He Zhenghao didn't participate in this exploration of the cave. The reason for the change must be, he saved up a lifetime of contributions and lost them all at once. To earn the nascent soul technique, he was ready to take a gamble. Why did the event of the attack by that beast, the dragon whale, happen? A scene suddenly flashed through Li Fan's mind. When he was in the stomach of the dragon whale, he found many unprocessed luli beads. The luli bead is the main material for refining the luli pill. After consuming the luli pill, it can produce effects similar to enlightenment. Luli beads can enlighten. This beast, the dragon whale, gradually gained sentience because it had consumed a large number of luli beads. By a stroke of fate, it encountered the island where spirit mist grass was grown. The spirit mist grass seemed to be of some benefit to it, so the dragon whale launched a raid and devoured most of the spirit mist grass on the island. The reason it could consume so many luli beads was because Li Fan narrowed his eyes. In the previous life, when he was assimilated into the Kanghai Pearl, he had seen the massive skeleton of a luli fish. In the skeleton, a huge luli bead shimmered in the sunlight. So, in this life, when he passed by, he casually slaughtered the leader of the luli fish. With the leader of the luli fish gone, the luli fish group was leaderless. They had no resistance and could only be devoured by the dragon whale. In the blink of an eye, Li Fan had unraveled the chain of events and was completely stunned. So, does this mean that his unintentional action back then led to He Zhenghao's death? And not only He Zhenghao, but how many other people were ruined by the manipulation of spirit mist grass trading? And how many other people had to take desperate risks, ultimately leading to their deaths? The cause of this series of subsequent events was just because Li Fan killed a giant luli fish. The death of the leader of the luli fish meant that the luli fish group could not resist other creatures' predation. As a result, an exotic beast, the dragon whale, gained sentience after devouring a large number of luli beads. This sentient dragon whale, by chance, destroyed all the spirit mist grass on an island. The destruction of the spirit mist grass, further manipulated by someone, led to countless people's fortunes being ruined. The ultimate result was the premature deaths of several Foundation establishment cultivators. These events were like interlocking shackles. At first, they were just lightly locking together, but one link led to another, tightening more and more. Until finally, once the fatal chain was formed, it was difficult to break free. So, even Foundation establishment cultivators are so simple to kill. This is the correct way to use the killing intent of the heavens and earth. The formless killing intent still seems a bit crude. Li Fan couldn't help but be overwhelmed with excitement and contemplation. In the Tianquan mirror, Lin Fan, who was immersed in various secrets, suddenly changed his expression. He quickly activated the auxiliary cultivation mode, and with the enlightenment enhancement, he began to comprehend. To kill someone, it is far from necessary to do it personally. With the truth's foresight and premonition, I can easily kill someone, just like I did with He Zhenghao. Through manipulation, I can kill across time and space. Hundreds of thousands of miles away, several years in the past, I can take someone's life. In other words, the butterfly effect. The flapping of a butterfly's wings could cause a series of events that lead to a hurricane on the other side of the world. If it weren't for He Zhenghao's unexpected death, Li Fan might have had to wait a long time before comprehending this butterfly effect. Fellow Taoist He, it's good that you died. Thinking of this, Li Fan sincerely lit a stick of incense in front of He Zhenghao's memorial tablet. Rest now. In the next life, I will not treat you unfairly. Li Fan silently said. After standing for a moment and waiting for the incense to burn out, Li Fan turned to leave. Just then, Steward Zhao suddenly spoke. Immortal Master, please wait. Asterisk 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 asterisk. TL note. And so it begins. Chapter 96. The Opportunity of the 10,000 Immortals Pavilion. Li Fan turned his head and looked at Steward Zhao. Steward Zhao, facing a legendary immortal, couldn't help but be a bit nervous. He carefully chose his words and asked, Esteemed Immortal, it seems like you had a good relationship with Immortal He. Li Fan was about to respond but suddenly remembered something. He contemplated for a moment and then said, Fellow Taoist He and I have known each other for more than 40 years, and he has shown me great care. I was away for a while, and I had no knowledge of his passing. Seeing fellow Taoist He's memorial tablet today was truly a great shock. I can only offer a joss stick. Saying this, Li Fan shook his head and sighed. Steward Zhao also sighed and said, Since I learned of Immortal He's passing and set up this memorial hall, it's been 26 days. You are the first and only one to come and pay your respects to him. Many immortals on the island have arrived in the past few days, either to search for his possessions or to compete for the position of guarding Luli Island. Now, with the new guardian immortal already in office, it's difficult for me to keep my current position. I have been unable to fulfill fellow Taoist's last wish all this time, and I feel guilty. Fortunately, I met you today. Steward Zhao looked relieved. Fellow Taoist's last wish? Li Fan asked, puzzled. Yes, Immortal He entrusted me with an item before he passed away. He instructed me that if he encountered misfortune in the future, I should hand this item over to the first fellow Taoist who came to offer their respects. How could he entrust an item to you, Immortal? Li Fan was surprised by Steward Zhao's answer. I won't hide it from you, Immortal. In my earlier years, I once saved Immortal He's life by a stroke of luck. Originally, Immortal He wanted to take me on as his disciple, but I was afraid of the difficulties of cultivation, so I asked for a job instead. Over these years, I have been serving Immortal He, and I gained his trust. Steward Zhao said, half proud and half sorrowful. It seemed like there was such an incident. Li Fan nodded. Moreover, it's very secure to leave it with me. After all, who would think that Immortal would be entrusted with an Immortal's belongings? The Immortals who have been coming and going these days have never even looked at me. Steward Zhao explained but realized that he might have said too much and stopped abruptly. He quickly turned and took out a small square box from under He Zhenghao's memorial tablet. This small box seemed to have the effect of isolating divine consciousness. Even when Li Fan stood right in front of it, he couldn't detect it. The item in this box is Immortal He's possession. I don't know what it's used for. Steward Zhao handed the box over, his voice anxious. Li Fan opened the box and found a charm with numerous characters that looked like a 10,000. It seemed somewhat familiar. This was. Li Fan took out an identical charm from his storage ring. The only difference was the aura on the charm. It was none other than the entry charm given to foreign cultivators for their first entry to Luli Island. Li Fan remembered that He Zhenghao had explained at the time that this charm was worth 100 contribution points. But what was the use of this thing? For a moment, Li Fan was puzzled. However, he still put the wooden box away. Looking at the nervous steward Zhao, Li Fan thought for a moment and said, "I will go and speak on your behalf to the new guardian Immortal. As for whether you can keep your position, I can't guarantee." Steward Zhao was overjoyed and immediately knelt down, repeatedly kowtowing. Li Fan waved his hand and left. Steward Zhao continued to kneel on the ground, not daring to move. After waiting for a long time, he slowly got up. Looking at He Zhenghao's memorial tablet, he said softly, "I've finally passed this hot potato to someone else. These days, watching the immortals flying in and out over my head, I couldn't even sleep well. Just now, that person didn't lie, and he was the first to come and pay his respects to you. Handing your possession to him is also in line with your last wish. My heart is finally at peace." After remaining silent for a long time, Steward Zhao whispered, "Cultivating immortality but dying even earlier than me. There isn't even anyone to collect your remains. It's really meaningless. Li Fan, holding the wooden box, returned to the island's protective formation and met the unfamiliar cultivator once more. The unfamiliar cultivator was named Yuan Xing and had taken over as the new guardian of Luli Island after a series of political maneuvers. Li Fan didn't mention Steward Zhao's relationship with He Zhenghao. He only said that Steward Zhao had a connection with him and inquired whether he could retain his position as the manager of Luli Island's finances. It was just a mortal job, and after thinking for a moment, Yuan Xing agreed. Li Fan expressed his gratitude. After exchanging communication talismans, Li Fan hastily returned to the Tianquan mirror. After some searching, Li Fan finally understood the purpose of the entry charm. Besides being used as an entry certificate to 10,000 Immortals Island, it also served as an item storage and retrieval voucher. The items weren't stored in the Tianquan mirror but in a place called the 10,000 Immortals Pavilion. Usually, what was stored there wasn't anything precious. It was often the inheritance left by cultivators for their mortal relatives to prevent any accidents. Only after the cultivator's death could their mortal relatives use the charm to withdraw the inheritance. So, the 10,000 Immortals Pavilion was not on Luli Island but on the remote island of Yulin, Kong Yun Si. With the purpose of the charm clarified, Li Fan didn't delay. He made a trip to Yulin Island and finally retrieved He Zhenghao's possession. It was a jade slip. Li Fan initially thought it was some kind of cultivation technique. It wasn't until he read through the content of the jade slip that he understood. The jade slip contained an unfinished work by He Zhenghao. Interpretation of the 100 Veins Formation Diagram. The book detailed He Zhenghao's special insights into formations over the years and some innovative ideas. Along with this book, there was a message from He Zhenghao. He said that his whole life, he only loved formations. After years of painstaking effort and many setbacks, he had barely completed most of the interpretation of the 100 Veins Formation Diagram. This time's expedition to the cave was supposed to be relatively low risk. However, it's better to be safe than sorry. If he met an accident and died, it wouldn't be a big deal. What worried him was that his life's work, the interpretation of the 100 Veins Formation Diagram, would be buried and lost forever. So, he made arrangements, hoping that the fellow cultivator who received the charm could hand over the interpretation of the 100 Veins Formation Diagram to any of the formation masters on 10,000 Immortals Island, with the hope of completing it. In the end, He Zhenghao couldn't help but vent his frustration. He talked about the various benefits of his mountain meditation technique. But unfortunately, it was just too difficult to practice. If not for this, he wouldn't have had to risk his life in that ancient cave to change his cultivation technique. Mountain meditation technique. Fellow Taoist He, you've truly presented me with a challenge. After putting away the jade slip, Li Fan's eyes shone with an inexplicable gleam. TL note. Patreon readers wanted a higher tier, so while I'm building a stockpile for that, you guys get consistent 2 chapters per day. Smiley face. Chapter 97, Mechanical Death. Sitting idly on a mountain and reaping the benefits, I never expected such a technique still exists in this world. Unfortunately, he just mentioned it briefly and didn't leave the technique behind. I wonder if fellow Taoist's remains can still be found. The mountain meditation technique is just too suitable for me. It can fully leverage the advantages of truth's precognition and anticipation. He didn't know about the mountain meditation technique before, but now that he knew its profound aspects, he was determined to master it, and no one could stop him. He Zhenghao had passed away and apparently hadn't passed on the technique. But it didn't matter. Li Fan had the sun-stealing technique, which could strip He Zhenghao's memories using soul puppets. Maybe he could recreate the mountain meditation technique. If luck wasn't on his side and he failed, he could plan for the next life. Thinking about it, Li Fan became interested in the ancient cave where He Zhenghao had perished. He Zhenghao, along with 5 foundation establishment stage cultivators, had all perished, with only one golden core stage cultivator narrowly surviving. This shocking news had stirred quite a commotion on Luli Island. Rumors were flying everywhere. After some inquiry, Li Fan gradually understood the whole story. This cave was located inside an underwater volcano. It had remained hidden until recently when the volcano suddenly erupted. Passing cultivators noticed the hidden cave, so He Zhenghao's group decided to explore it. 1 golden core stage and 5 foundation establishment stage cultivators. It wasn't a weak lineup by any means. According to the information they obtained, the cave belonged to a golden core cultivator from ancient times named Tianyang. According to common sense, exploring a golden core cultivator's cave should not have been too difficult. Even if they couldn't carry everything away, they should have been able to leave safely, even if they encountered danger. But as they ventured deeper into the cave and triggered a restriction, they found that Tianyang was a skilled practitioner of a long-lost mechanical art from ancient times. A dozen or so mechanical puppets were instantly activated, surrounding the group. Only a cultivator named Zheng Xiaoyun, who was in the golden core stage, managed to escape despite severe injuries. The other 5 foundation establishment stage cultivators all met gruesome ends at the hands of the mechanical puppets. Because 3 of the deceased foundation establishment stage cultivators were island guardians of Kong Yunsi Islands, the official authorities of the 10,000 Immortals League even sent a nascent soul expert to investigate whether there was any intentional foul play involved. The conclusion was that it was indeed an accident. The death of the 5 foundation establishment stage cultivators didn't dampen the enthusiasm for exploring the cave. On the contrary, it ignited even more passion among cultivators. Ignoring the priceless mechanical puppets within the cave, the inheritance left behind by the 5 foundation establishment stage cultivators had already made many people envious. It was said that the second exploration team had already been assembled. The leader this time was a nascent soul expert, True Lord Gushuan. This person was obsessed with various esoteric techniques, and when he heard that a long-lost mechanical art had reappeared in the world, he couldn't contain his excitement. So, he decided to go see for himself. I wonder if this exploration will be successful. But this time, the team is made up of nascent soul and golden core cultivators. I won't join in the excitement. There are so many treasures there, surely no one would want to compete with me over fellow Taoist's remains, right? Maybe I can post a bounty. 1,000 contribution points. That might be too much, 500 should be enough. Li Fan wasn't worried about the mountain meditation technique leaking out. Cultivators in this realm usually didn't carry their technique jade slips with them. Generally, after mastering a technique, they chose to destroy the jade slip and re-record it when needed. The need often arose when trading techniques. Cultivation techniques couldn't be practiced concurrently, making them the most valuable resource in the cultivation world. A technique like the mountain meditation technique, found inadvertently in an ancient cave, can be sold to the 10,000 Immortals League or other organizations for a good price if you choose not to practice it. Techniques like the minor yan water technique, exchanged from the Tianshuan mirror, can also be sold back after breaking through to the next realm, thus recovering some contribution points. After selling a technique, the memories related to it are naturally erased from your mind. There are roughly 2 types of cultivation techniques in the world. One type is developed after the Great Calamity, with corresponding backups. Even if the cultivator who practices it accidentally dies, the technique won't be lost but will be collected and sold again, just like the 2 techniques in Qianhong's tomb. The other type includes techniques that existed before the Great Calamity, but due to various reasons, they aren't known to the world. Only the cultivator practicing it knows about it. If that practitioner passes away without leaving a copy, it usually means the technique is entirely lost. Mountain meditation technique, sea fixing sword technique, and others fall into this category. Using the sun stealing technique, I can, with a certain probability, recreate lost techniques from the remains of a cultivator. Or perhaps, this is the correct way to use the sun stealing technique. Li Fan fell into contemplation. After a while, he shook his head. Let's get fellow Taoist's remains out first. Before that, I need to do a few tasks to earn some contribution points. Creating a clone could only be done by the main body. Furthermore, since he had decided that the clone Fan Lin wouldn't have any connection with the main body, it was better for the main body to issue the task personally. For most cultivators, 500 contribution points might take half a year or more to accumulate, but for Li Fan, who had knowledge of many secrets in the Kongyun Sea, it was just one task. 3 years had passed since he last completed the blue blood coral task. Doing 1 or 2 tasks at this time wouldn't attract too much attention. So, Li Fan began browsing the task list. Soon, he picked a 2,000-point reward bounty mission. Accepting the task, he replied. In the southwest sea area of the Kongyun Sea, below the Gonghai Island, there is a sea creature matching the description you're looking for. Equivalent to late Qi condensation stage, but they move in groups, making them challenging to deal with. Note that this cave has 2 layers. You need to explore it carefully to find the entrance to the second layer. The sea creatures are in the second layer. He still only provided information. After half a day, the other party confirmed the accuracy of the information. Quite generously, they awarded Li Fan with 1,000 contribution points. With the contribution points in hand, Li Fan immediately issued a 500-point contribution task in the Tianquan Mirror. In the task description, he mentioned his close friendship with He Zhenghao over almost 40 years, describing their bond as inseparable. He expressed his reluctance to leave his remains exposed outside and therefore offered a reward to bring back He Zhenghao's remains for a proper burial. He originally thought it would take some time for someone to accept the task. However, to his surprise, it was picked up quickly. The person who accepted the task was a member of the exploration team currently assembling. He was a Foundation establishment stage cultivator. The person sent a message asking Li Fan if he wanted to join them. With a nascent soul expert leading the team, you're sure to return safely, they reassured Li Fan. Chapter 98. Discerning Onia's fate through 2 lifetimes. The other person also mentioned that they inquired because it's quite rare to find someone so emotionally attached in the current cultivation world. Li Fan looked at the person's name. Song Weiyu, who seemed to be a female cultivator. Should he go or not? The Golden Core expert's abode had the assurance of safety due to the nascent soul powerhouse leading the team. However, Li Fan thought about it and decided to politely decline. He only sought He Zhenghao's remains, and if Song Weiyu's mission was successful, she would surely bring them back. There was no need to take unnecessary risks. If there were any significant opportunities in that abode, Li Fan could inquire about them and explore them in the next lifetime. Song Weiyu didn't respond further after Li Fan's rejection. With everything settled, Li Fan began practicing the cloud water illusory dream art. He was very focused on Zhang Haobo, his pawn. To ensure he didn't deviate from the path of growth Li Fan had set for him, he needed to periodically use illusory dreams on him. It was easy during his mortal phase. However, influencing his thoughts once he reached the Qi condensation stage and especially after breaking through to the Foundation establishment stage would be much more challenging. Therefore, Li Fan needed to advance the cloud water illusory dream art to the second level. The cloud water illusory dream art was a unique cultivation technique with 7 levels, unrelated to cultivation realms like Foundation establishment or Qi condensation. Instead, it depended on the strength of one's spiritual consciousness and the precision of constructing illusions. The higher the level of this technique one practiced, the stronger the influence of their illusions. In theory, even an ordinary mortal could, with sufficiently strong spiritual power, submerge a golden core or even nascent soul stage cultivator in illusions. However, the cultivator's realm usually determined the strength of their spiritual consciousness, so this situation was almost non-existent. 3 months later, Luli Island, on board the Kengyuan ship. Zhang Haobo stood at the bow, facing the sea breeze, gazing at the ocean. He furrowed his brows as if searching for something. Suddenly, he spotted a familiar-looking reef in the distance. His spirit was rejuvenated, and he immediately leapt into the sea, leaving the surrounding crew astonished. Zhang Haobo navigated through the dim underwater environment and soon reached the seabed. If an ordinary mortal had ventured this deep underwater, they would have succumbed to the immense pressure and perished. However, after 3 months of cultivation, most of the immortal mortal miasma within Zhang Haobo's body had been cleared away. His constitution had significantly improved, and he was not far from breaking through to the qi condensation stage. Combined with his natural affinity for water, he was unafraid. Zhang Haobo swam further along the seabed when he suddenly noticed something. His speed increased sharply as he swam toward a half-buried corpse in the mud. He pulled the remains out of the muck and found a book resting on the corpse's chest. It was the sea-fixing sword technique. It's not a dream, I have been reborn. Zhang Haobo stroked the cover of the book as he mumbled to himself. Although he had previously accepted that he had been reborn, it was still a concept too extraordinary to grasp. Moreover, the memories of his previous life were gradually fading, causing him to doubt this situation. Fortunately, recently, probably due to his imminent breakthrough to the qi condensation stage, some forgotten details had been resurfacing in his mind. This included the location where he initially salvaged the sea-fixing sword technique. He took the opportunity of this voyage to verify his rebirth. Now, with these skeletal remains and the reappearance of the sea-fixing sword technique, Zhang Haobo had finally confirmed that he had indeed been reborn. His gaze became resolute, and he tucked the book into his bosom. I can't delay any longer, I must improve my cultivation quickly. Only by reaching a higher realm can I prevent that impending calamity. Just a mere qi condensation stage cultivator won't be enough. I need to gain more strength, or I won't be able to convince anyone. At least foundation establishment or even golden core. Thinking this way, Zhang Haobo slowly swam back to the surface and climbed back onto the Kengyuan ship. The crew members observed their serious captain and refrained from asking too many questions. Since some time ago, their captain seemed to undergo an inexplicable transformation. The jovial and playful captain they once knew had vanished. Zhang Haobo was becoming less jovial, and his aura was growing stronger every day, resembling the island's immortal masters. As a result, they became somewhat intimidated and uneasy in his presence. Above the Kengyuan ship, Li Fan, who remained concealed, intently observed Zhang Haobo while using the Jade Cosmos Thousand Variations Sutra to examine his fate. Indeed, there seems to be a peculiar change in his fate. It's very subtle, but I initiated this change myself, so I naturally pay special attention to it. Thus, I noticed it. Li Fan carefully considered the subtle differences before and after, and it seemed like he was beginning to understand something. In cultivation, it's often one step at a time, with each step being quicker than the last. Last lifetime, Zhang Haobo only embarked on the path of cultivation in middle age due to a fortuitous opportunity. While his luck was extraordinary, reaching foundation establishment in just over 10 years was already his limit. That was his destined fate. But this lifetime, under my guidance, he began his cultivation over a decade earlier. When fate changes, it naturally flows differently, with small changes compounding upon each other. Li Fan murmured softly, his eyes growing brighter. Being able to personally witness the before and after changes in someone's fate was a great opportunity for Li Fan. If it weren't for the truth which allowed him to compare and verify the destinies of 2 lifetimes, he wouldn't have been able to know the fate of himself or others. Just as in his previous life, only by turning into the Kanghai Sea could he peek into the killing intent of the heavens. Only by spanning 2 lifetimes could one understand the changes in fate. With this realization, Li Fan couldn't help but let out a deep chuckle. Perhaps you will really bring me some surprises. I am genuinely looking forward to your performance, Zhang Haobo. In a cheerful mood, Li Fan leisurely flew back to Luli Island. 3 months had passed, but his avatar, Fan Lin, remained in a state of epiphany over the butterfly effect. The state of enlightenment was still ongoing. Contribution points were being spent like flowing water, and he had used almost 2,000 points so far. Fortunately, his avatar had a reserve of 100,000 contribution points, so it could endure this level of expenditure. I wonder what kind of divine power my avatar will comprehend when it emerges from this epiphany. Li Fan contemplated these possibilities as he arrived within the protective array of Luli Island. He intended to use the teleportation formation to return to 10,000 Immortals Island. However, he noticed that Yuan Xing, the new guardian immortal of Luli Island, had a grave expression, filled with worry. Taoist Yuan, what has happened? Li Fan politely inquired. Yuan Xing appeared to be deep in thought, and for a moment, he didn't respond. Taoist Yuan, Li Fan had to repeat his question. Finally, Yuan Xing snapped back to attention and looked at Li Fan with a sigh. Something bad has happened. The expedition team led by True Lord Gushuan that went to explore the ancient abode, they're all dead. Even True Lord Gushuan himself didn't manage to escape. Chapter 99. You are stronger, so am I. Li Fan was surprised and asked, how could this happen? Wasn't it just a golden core cultivator's cave? How did even a nascent soul master fall? Yuan Xing shook his head and said, the exact situation is unclear right now. They have temporarily sealed the entrance to that cave to prevent any unsuspecting individuals from entering and meeting their demise. He continued, in the entire 10,000 Immortals Island, there are only about 10 nascent soul cultivators. So the sudden loss of one is indeed significant. Let alone the 4 Golden Core and 13 Foundation Establishment cultivators who perished in 2 consecutive exploration attempts. Now, the island is not in a very peaceful state. With so many cultivators lost, their positions on the island are now vacant. Various factions have started maneuvering behind the scenes to vie for these opportunities. Even the 10,000 Immortals Alliance has reopened its investigation into Zheng Xiaoyun. This time, it's being conducted by the Hall of Heavenly Secrets' Elder Gongsun. We don't know if they will find anything substantial. It's a tumultuous time. After listening to Yuan Xing's concerns, Li Fan realized that there was an additional reason behind his worries. It turned out that Yuan Xing had relied on the now-deceased True Lord Gushuan as his backer. Thanks to this connection, he managed to defeat numerous competitors and became the guardian of Luli Island. However, with his protector falling, Yuan Xing seemed anxious about his own position. Li Fan thought to himself, if even a nascent soul cultivator has fallen, it seems that the cultivation cave is extremely dangerous. It might be a while before I can retrieve the remains of fellow Taoist He. However, a few days later, there appeared to be a turning point in the situation. The 10,000 Immortals Alliance's investigation results were released, which concluded that a cultivator named Zheng Xiaoyun, who was in the Golden Core stage, was not responsible for the deaths of the explorers. The reason for the second exploration team's complete annihilation was attributed to the peculiar nature of the mechanisms and puppets within the cave of Tianyang. These mechanisms and puppets had the unique characteristic of becoming stronger when faced with stronger opponents. During the first exploration led by Zheng Xiaoyun, these puppets only exhibited the combat strength of Golden Core cultivators, which allowed Zheng Xiaoyun to survive. However, when True Lord Gushuan led the second expedition, these puppets suddenly exhibited the power of nascent soul cultivators, catching the team off guard and leading to their deaths. The mechanisms and puppets in the cave were designed to absorb the energy of the underground volcanoes. Over the thousands of years, they had become significantly more potent. The upper limit of their strength was unclear. Now, it was clear that True Lord Gushuan's death was not unjust. No one could have expected that within the small cave of a mere Golden Core cultivator, such terrifying combat power was hidden. The official announcement from the 10,000 Immortals Alliance lifted the heavy atmosphere over 10,000 Immortals Island. Most people found the investigation results credible, especially since Elder Gongsun from the Hall of Heavenly Secrets, known for his exceptional ability to predict events and determine causality, was responsible for the inquiry. Countless qi condensation cultivators in the Kongyun Sea were reinvigorated by the revelation that there were only a dozen puppets at the qi condensation stage which didn't pose much of a threat. If it were possible to bring back even one of those puppets. Countless qi condensation cultivators were immediately filled with all sorts of ideas, their hearts throbbing with excitement. They began clamoring to form teams to explore the cave of Tianyang for the third time. When Li Fan heard this news, he couldn't help but feel tempted himself. After all, during the qi condensation stage, he was practically invincible. Those with lower realms could be easily handled with his insect binding technique. As for those at the same qi condensation stage, he had a multitude of techniques, such as the formless killing intent, cloud water illusory dream art, azure flame illusionary spirit, and more. Li Fan couldn't believe that there would be anyone within the Kongyun Sea stronger than him. Should he explore this cave? Li Fan contemplated this for a moment but then thought it over and decided that something wasn't right. If these puppets really became stronger when facing stronger opponents, then the 10,000 Immortals Alliance could secretly gather a group of qi condensation cultivators to infiltrate the cave, defeating the puppets, and bringing them all back. The idea of acquiring over a dozen puppets, each at least equivalent to the nascent soul stage, would be too enticing for the 10,000 Immortals Alliance to pass up. Why would they foolishly disclose this information to the public? The only explanation was that there must be other peculiar aspects to these puppets within the cave that the 10,000 Immortals Alliance couldn't predict. Li Fan had also heard of Elder Gongsun, the Hall of Heavenly Secrets' elder. He had investigated the situation when Li Fan had completed the bounty regarding the dragon whale. Elder Gongsun had only determined the immediate cause of death. The whale had been surrounded by several deep-sea behemoths and had exhausted its life. However, he hadn't uncovered the root cause, Li Fan's activation of the formless killing intent. Therefore, Li Fan believed that Elder Gongsun could indeed predict events and determine causality, but his abilities were like a blind person touching an elephant, only grasping part of the truth. This understanding wasn't exclusive to Li Fan, many others shared this viewpoint. At first, when they were excited and hot-headed, they quickly organized into a group. In total, there were over 30 of them, and they were determined to explore the cave of Tianyang once again. Li Fan, on the other hand, simply reposted the bounty for fellow Taoist's remains and patiently waited to see how it would all unfold. 10 days later, the exploration team returned in disarray. Most of the 30-plus people escaped from the cave. As they tearfully recounted their experiences, the onlookers learned what had happened inside the cave. The 17 puppets inside were incredibly powerful. They were constructed from some unknown material, making them incredibly durable. No spell seemed to affect them, leaving no marks or damage whatsoever. Not even a scratch could be left. Chapter 100. Zhang Haobo tests his sword. This is only natural. Although these puppet mechanisms have reduced their combat power to the chi condensation stage, their physical strength alone is capable of withstanding attacks from nascent soul stage cultivators. How can a group of chi condensation cultivators hope to harm them? After a series of pitiful attacks from the 30-plus chi condensation cultivators, the 17 puppets remained unfazed. They were impervious to any damage. In return, the puppets' offensive capabilities, limited to the chi condensation stage, didn't appear as menacing. After a grueling battle, the third exploration team, although battered, managed to preserve most of their lives. Finally, everyone began to understand that this cave of Tianyang was far beyond the reach of their group of low-level chi condensation cultivators. The 17 high-defense puppet mechanisms were like formidable gatekeepers, keeping all intruders at bay. Li Fan pondered, wondering how things had turned out for this cave in the past. Since he joined the 10,000 Immortals Alliance, he had never heard anyone discuss the matter. It seemed the cave had disappeared long ago. Perhaps, in the end, a powerful expert will intervene to resolve this matter, Li Fan speculated. With the storm raised by the cave gradually calming down, cultivators began to deliberately forget about this treasure that they could see but not possess. Some with ulterior motives attempted to secretly rally others, hoping to assemble hundreds of chi condensation cultivators for another exploration. The plan was to use a large group to engage the 17 puppets while the others ventured deep into the mansion to seek opportunities. But no one paid attention to their proposals. Everyone was a chi condensation cultivator, and they were unwilling to take the risks and potentially sacrifice their lives for someone else's gain. Thus, the number of cultivators with the cave in their minds gradually dwindled, and the 10,000 Immortals Alliance seemed to forget the matter entirely. The Kong Yunxi became calm once more, and Li Fan, who seldom had time to focus on his cultivation, finally settled down to practice in peace. Time passed, and half a year later, the 13th year had arrived. On this day, Li Fan was examining the results of his half-year intensive cultivation. He compared the Jade Cosmos Thousand Variations Sutra with the Sun-Stealing Technique, and practiced them together. Both techniques had advanced to the later stages of the chi condensation realm, and he could sense the existence of bottlenecks. Once he broke through these bottlenecks, he would be able to use a heavenly treasure to establish his foundation and become a foundation establishment cultivator. As for the Cloud Water Illusory Dream Art, it had progressed slowly after reaching the third layer, and he had to temporarily halt his practice. This third layer was already capable of affecting nascent soul stage cultivators, with the specific effects determined by the difference in spiritual strength between Li Fan and the opponent. However, the Stalking Shadow Technique and the Netherworld Spirit Illusion Technique didn't receive much attention over this period. Maybe having so many techniques to practice isn't such a good thing. Perhaps I should consider merging and simplifying them. Of course, with my current level of insight into these techniques, I can't achieve that, Li Fan pondered. However, if one were to use the Tianquan mirror's enlightenment over a long period of time, it might not be impossible. His clone, Fan Lin, was still immersed in enlightenment. He had already consumed over 6,000 points of contribution, but Li Fan didn't mind. The longer Fan Lin's enlightenment lasted, the more profound the insights he might gain. Li Fan even hoped that Fan Lin could spend all of his 100,000 contribution points. Suddenly, Li Fan felt a subtle weakening of the formless killing intent that had been locked onto Zhang Haobo all along. Zhang Haobo finally advanced to the qi condensation stage. That's great, faster than I expected. Who knows, perhaps he'll achieve the golden core stage in just over a decade. In less than a year, Zhang Haobo had transformed from an ordinary mortal into a qi condensation stage cultivator. With his altered fate, his cultivation speed had increased significantly compared to the previous life. The faster he cultivated, the stronger his power, and the greater influence he could exert. Although he might not directly participate in the upcoming incineration of the Kong Yun Sea, Li Fan was well aware of the cascading effects a golden core cultivator could trigger. The incineration of the sea in this life is really worth looking forward to. 3 months later, Li Fan received a message from Yuan Xing while in seclusion. Li Fan, do you know that we have an incredible individual on our Luli Island recently? Li Fan's eyes lit up. Oh, I'd like to hear more. Hee, have a look, Yuan Xing sent over a video. In the video, 17 massive puppets, entirely red, wielded huge fists as they fought with a blue water sword in front of them. At the center, surrounded by the 17 puppets, stood one person, unmistakably Zhang Haobo. He had 7 floating blue swords that rotated around him, acting as a protective formation. Zhang Haobo controlled 10 more water swords simultaneously, engaging all the puppets in battle. This kind of combat was clearly extremely taxing on his mental power. After a short time, 3 puppets broke through the sword blockade and approached Zhang Haobo. Out of the 7 protective swords, Zhang Haobo instantly divided 3 to face the incoming puppets while retreating. In the blink of an eye, within the fury and frustration of the puppets, Zhang Haobo left the cave. After a while, Yuan Xing's triumphant voice came through. What do you think? Are these 17 puppets from the cave of Tianyang? Fighting alone against 17 puppets, although he only lasted for a short time, it's still quite impressive. Who is this person? Li Fan pretended not to know. Hee, this person is called Zhang Haobo. Just over a year ago, he was just an ordinary mortal. A few months ago, he advanced to the qi condensation stage, and I introduced him to our 10,000 Immortals Alliance. After hearing about the cave of Tianyang, he went there alone. At first, I didn't know what he was doing, but later, I found out. He went there to practice against those 17 puppet mechanisms. In the beginning, it said he could only last a few breaths. Then, as time passed, he could endure longer against the puppets. The video I sent you was from over half a month ago. I wonder what the situation is like now.